Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Petit Family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family due to their stable economic background and well-behaved children, earning them genuine admiration from those around them. William Petit, the father, was a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership skills. He was also the top student in his class, going on to earn a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William's true passion lay in helping others, caring for the sick, and making a positive impact on the social. After completing his law degree, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It was during his third year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh that William met Jennifer Hawke, a nurse specializing in oncology and co-director of the Health Center for a pre-graduate internship program. They fell deeply in love, with those who knew them confirming that they were perfectly suited for each other. The couple got married in 1985. 4 years later, they had their first daughter, Haley. Her birth inspired them to have a large family, which prompted them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. Following childbirth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and internship co-director. However, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease with no cure that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her family remained supportive throughout. At 10 years old, Haley started raising money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, generating significant funds over time. Michaela also performed well academically. And when Haley went to college, Michaela planned to take over the fundraising efforts so she could continue supporting their community. The summer before, Michaela had learned to cook and she enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this daily activity leads the family to an encounter with a criminal. One July evening in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner, but she needed additional ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market, where they coincidentally encountered Joshua Komisarjevsky, a man recently released from prison. Joshua had experienced a traumatic and complicated childhood. He was born to teenage parents. He was put up for adoption a week after birth and adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, renowned artists in Europe known for their strict and religious upbringing. Joshua had a high IQ, but struggled in school, prompting his parents to decide that homeschooling was a better option. During his trial, Joshua revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose not to address the issue. This traumatic experience contributed to the development of his rebellious personality. At the age of 14, Joshua was accused of abusing his sister. Around the same time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 charges of burglary and resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he gave a chilling confession, revealing that he enjoyed invading other people's private space, enjoyed the feeling of being close to them while they slept, and found particular satisfaction in making others feel insecure. Released on parole in 2007 at the age of 27, officials deemed Joshua a danger to society, describing him as a perverted individual and disturbing behavior. Despite these warnings, the jury declared him fit for release. Following his release, Joshua stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, starting with his first incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. He was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary, and after being sentenced in 2004, he was granted parole in 2006, which led him to the same halfway house where he met Joshua. On July 22, 2007, Joshua trailed Michaela Petit and her mother as they traveled to a nearby market to purchase. He paid close attention to and noted specific details about Michaela's vehicle, facial features, and blonde hair. After completing their shopping, Michaela and her mother returned home, having no knowledge that Joshua had been following them. Later, Hayes sent Joshua a text message indicating he was impatient to start and needed a drink soon. Hayes asked if their plan was still on, to which Joshua confirmed to be yes. When Hayes asked how much longer he had to wait, Joshua told him he was busy putting his child to bed and advised Hayes to be patient. Hayes responded by expressing his eagerness to proceed. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly follows the Petit family in his car to find out the exact location of their house. The whole family was enjoying a nice dinner together, but they unaware that it would be the last time they would all be together. Later that night, while everyone was asleep except for William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was disrupted by strange noises inside the house. William remembered feeling groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Joshua and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door, initially planning to rob the family. However, upon finding a baseball bat, they used it to brutally beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. One of the intruders threatened to shoot him if he moved. William was then restrained with ropes, tied to a pole in the basement. Joshua and Haley proceeded upstairs to Haley's room, where they found her sleeping. They tied Haley and Michaela to their bedposts, covering their heads with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit had fallen asleep, but was soon woken up by Joshua and Hayes. They controlled Jennifer by tying her hands and feet, feeling that they now had control of the house. Joshua and Hayes then took their time to thoroughly inspect the house, and even stopped to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After collecting valuables such as jewelry, cash, Joshua and Hayes decided it was time to leave. It seemed the Petit family's ordeal was finally over as they heard the burglars leave the house. However, their nightmare was far from over. Joshua and Hayes sold the items at a pawn shop, but after realizing they hadn't made as much money as they expected, their greed drove them to return to the house. When they returned to the Petit house, they discovered a check register with $40,000 and decided to steal a total of $155,000. Once back, they informed Jennifer of their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't comply. Desperate and prioritizing her daughter's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to accompany Hayes to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence to enter Michaela's room. He untied Michaela, undressed her, and took photos with his cell phone. He assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, Joshua took her to the bathroom to clean her, aiming to eliminate any DNA evidence. He ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The evidence that Joshua raped Michaela was found during her autopsy. State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered Joshua's DNA in Michaela's body. At the bank, everything initially seemed to go smoothly. However, Hayes failed to notice Jennifer's actions while she was in line. Before approaching the teller, Jennifer wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read that her name was Jennifer Petit, she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account, and that her family was in danger, so Jennifer asked them to call the police, or her family would be killed. The teller gave Jennifer the money despite her lack of identification. With the cash, Jennifer left the bank and returned to the car with Hayes. The bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. However, the manager told the 911 dispatcher that Jennifer had indicated the home invaders were being nice and only wanted money. Cheshire police received a report from the bank and they set up a vehicle perimeter around the area without alerting the suspect. From a distance, the police observed the situation without intervening. Meanwhile, back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice about his actions towards Michaela, implying that he could easily harm Jennifer as well. Hayes then grabbed Jennifer, pinned her to the ground, and started removing her clothes. William heard his wife being assaulted upstairs and managed to flee. One of the intruders responded, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William crawled to the basement stairs and eventually made it to the backyard. William thought the intruders would shoot them all soon, so he knew he had to act fast. Joshua checked on William but found he had escaped. According to Hayes' confession, Joshua told Hayes that William had gotten away while Hayes was raping Jennifer in the living room. Upon hearing this, Hayes strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Shortly after, they heard William shouting for help. A neighbor, who initially didn't recognize William due to his injuries, immediately called 911. Realizing the police would arrive soon, Joshua and Hayes tried to eliminate evidence. Hayes and Joshua doused Jennifer's lifeless body, various parts of the house including Michaela and Haley's bedroom, and also Michaela and Haley themselves with gasoline. Hayes and Joshua started a fire at the scene, unaware that the police had blocked off the area just a few miles away. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle and were surrounded by officers. The two perpetrators, Joshua and Hayes, who were later identified as ex-convicts, were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. Meanwhile, the fire at the house was spreading rapidly. An ambulance arrived and took William Petit, was seriously injured, to the nearest hospital. Firefighters soon followed and attempted to put out the blaze. Once the fire was extinguished, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. The first body they found was Jennifer's, which was badly charred and had rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they found Michaela tied to her bed, her body completely consumed by the fire. In a desperate bid to escape, Haley had managed to break free restraints but collapsed just a few meters away due to smoke inhalation. William had also managed to free himself and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help, but the neighbor didn't initially recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Joshua and Hayes admitted to the murders during questioning. Detectives noticed that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. However, each attacker claimed the other was the main person responsible for planning the home invasion. Joshua also accused William of being responsible for the murders. In his diary, Joshua referred to William as a coward, stating that William had the opportunity to save his family but chose not to. The trial of Hayes started on September 13, 2010, with a jury of 12 people, consisting of 7 women and 5 men. The defense team argued that Joshua was the mastermind behind the crime and was responsible for making it more brutal. On the other hand, the prosecutors believed that both Hayes and Joshua were equally responsible. After about 5 hours of discussion, the jury found Hayes guilty on October 5. The sentencing phase began on October 18, but the jury was initially torn between recommending life imprisonment or the death penalty. Hayes' defense team argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. However, on November 8, the jury decided to recommend the death sentence for Hayes. Before the trial, Hayes had tried to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but the prosecutors wanted the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain he caused the Petit family. He stated that death would be a welcome relief and hoped it would bring some peace to those he hurt. Judge John Blue sentenced Hayes to 6 death sentences and 106 additional years for other crimes. However, when Connecticut abolished capital punishment in 2015, Hayes' death sentence was changed to life imprisonment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Hayes was the one who directed Joshua. Joshua was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During Joshua's sentencing, he expressed remorse and shame for the crime, claiming he never intended to kill anyone. The judge set an execution date of July 20, 2012, holding Joshua accountable for his actions. However, In August 2015, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished capital punishment. William Petit, the lone survivor of his family, was released from the hospital after 4 days. Upon his discharge, he immediately attended the funeral service for his wife and daughters. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, William struggled to come to terms with the devastating reality that his loved ones were truly gone forever. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sumner family. Carol and Reggie Sumner raised in Charleston, South Carolina. They were born in the same year, went to the same school, and were even in the same grade. Over time, their childhood friendship blossomed into a deeper affection. Neither of them recalls exactly when they began to develop romantic feelings for each other, but by the time they were 15 years old in 1959, they were dating. Their friends described them as a beautiful and harmonious couple. Reggie and Carol treasured their memories, keeping photos of their happy times together in their home archives. At the time, it seemed like they had their whole lives ahead of them, and they looked forward to a long and happy future together. Their feelings for each other were strong and mutual, and they were practically inseparable both in and out of school. They even started making plans to get married as soon as they turned 18, with the full support of their parents. In 1962, Reggie and Carol, a young couple, graduated from high school. However, their plans to get married were put on hold when Reggie was drafted into the Army a few months later. They decided to postpone their wedding until Reggie returned from his military service and made a promise to write each other regularly. As time passed, the separation took its toll. Reggie was deployed to Vietnam. Unfortunately, Carol lost contact with him, and she didn't even know if he was still alive. Despite the uncertainty, Carol continued her education and started working at the Charleston Air Force Base. A few years later, Carol got married, but the marriage was short-lived and ended in divorce. They didn't have any children together. In 1975, Carol married again, this time to Richard Alford, and gave birth to their daughter, Rhonda, in 1977. However, this marriage was also troubled, as Richard was abusive and had a drinking problem. The situation became unbearable for Carol, and by the mid-1980s, she couldn't take the abuse anymore. She took her daughter and filed for divorce. However, Richard refused to leave her alone and continued to harass her, trying to ruin her life. In 1987, Richard purchased a handgun and ammunition. After a night of heavy drinking, he went to his ex-wife Carol's home, intending to confront her. When Carol answered the door, their 10-year-old daughter Rhonda was present in the room. However, the presence of his child did not deter Richard, who was intoxicated. He pulled out the gun and shot Carol multiple times in front of Rhonda. Richard then drove to a secluded area, where he fired the remaining bullet into his temple, taking his own life. Carol was fortunate to survive the shooting due to the prompt response of neighbors, who heard the gunshots and Rhonda's cries for help. They called the police and an ambulance, which rushed Carol to the hospital. Carol's condition was critical, and she underwent several complex surgeries and blood transfusions. Although she eventually recovered, she suffered significant injuries, including complete blindness in her right eye and permanent disability. Years later, in the late 1990s, Carol's health began to deteriorate again. She experienced severe pain, weight loss, and weakness. After a thorough examination at the hospital, she received a devastating diagnosis: liver cancer. Tragically, as a result of being severely injured by gunshot wounds, Carol lost her position on an Air Force base. With cancer added to her medical complications, she found that physical strain, prolonged periods on her feet, and any heavy physical exertion exceeded her capability. Given these medical constraints, Carol then decided to re-enter the workforce as a call center operator for a cable television provider within her hometown, Charleston. Reggie was in Vietnam for a long time, and due to the prolonged war, he was severely wounded and nearly lost his leg. He spent a significant amount of time in the hospital, and during this period, his name was mistakenly listed among the dead. As a result, his relatives believed he had passed away. Reggie was fortunate to survive and eventually returned home. However, by then, he had lost touch with his former lover, Carol, who had moved to a different location, gotten married, and also assumed Reggie had died in the war. Years later, Reggie got married, but his war injuries led to the development of diabetes and other chronic diseases. He was never able to become a father, and eventually, his marriage ended in separation. Since then, he has lived alone. Reggie found work as a laborer at the local railroad and no longer expected any pleasant surprises from life. In the fall of 2000, Carol was having a typical day at work, answering phones and advising customers. When she picked up another call, she was shocked to hear a voice that sent shivers down her spine. It was a voice she knew all too well, her first high school love, Reggie. However, she was hesitant to respond, as she had thought Reggie was dead. After answering the customer's questions, Carol mustered up the courage to say Reggie's full name out loud. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by Reggie's timid question. Carol burst into tears, revealing that she was she he had dated in high school, the one he had once wanted to marry. For several minutes, they both cried, unable to speak. Eventually, they composed themselves and discovered that they still lived in their hometown. They agreed to meet the next evening, reuniting after all these years. The next day, Carol spent hours getting ready for the date, trying on different dresses and perfecting her hair and makeup. As she looked in the mirror, she was reminded that time had changed her. She was no longer the young, vibrant woman Reggie remembered from the past. Still, she was eager to win him over once more. Their meeting was thrilling for both, having spent decades apart, and their conversation was unrelenting as they recounted stories from their lives, both happy and sorrowful, covering their previous marriages. Professional triumphs, struggles, health challenges, and basking in nostalgia as they reflected on their lost romance and first true love for one another. Reggie and Carol were determined to make the most of their reunion after a period of separation. They quickly fell into a routine of spending every day together, and within a couple of weeks, they decided to take the next step by moving in together. Just 5 months later, they got married, and Carol joined her husband in his home in the Riverland Terrace neighborhood. As they settled into family life, they initially resided in their hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. They were deeply in love, happy, and enthusiastic about building a life together. However, they faced some challenges, particularly with their health, as they were both still young but struggling with health issues. One of the neighbors who lived nearby was the Cole family, with whom Reggie had a long-standing acquaintance. The patriarch of the family, Stephen, had experienced firsthand the traumatic effects of the Vietnam War. Sustaining severe wounds during combat had resulted in confinement to a wheelchair for many years. His wife, Natalie, often prioritized her social life, spending time with friends at bars after work, instead of rushing home to take care of her family. As a result, their daughter, Tiffany, found herself frequently neglected and left unattended from a young age. Tiffany's situation improved slightly when she befriended the new neighbors, Reggie and Carol. During this time, Tiffany was still in high school, and the compassionate Carol took an instant liking to she. Carol felt genuine sympathy for Tiffany. For 5 years, Carol did her best to support and care for Tiffany, sometimes sponsoring cozy family meals, buying Tiffany clothes, and sharing enough allowance. Carol treated Tiffany like a daughter, showering her with love, care, and attention. When the Carol and Reggie decided to sell their Chevrolet Lumina minivan in 2004, Tiffany asked to buy it from them on an installment plan, as she desperately needed a car but had no money. They kindly offered to sell it to her for a minimal amount, which they divided into 12 monthly payments. In early 2005, Carol and Reggie made a difficult decision to leave their home and relocate to Florida. Their health had begun to decline significantly, and doctors advised them to move to a warmer climate with ocean access. Since Carol and Reggie were both retired, they decided to make a big change and start over. Carol and Reggie sold their large home in Charleston and bought a new place in Jacksonville, Florida. They also purchased a new Lincoln Town car. They was very happy and settled into their new life, making plans for their future together. Carol would call her adult daughter Rhonda every day to share her thoughts, plans, and daily experiences. However, in June 2005, Rhonda was surprised and concerned when her mother didn't call her as usual. At first, Rhonda tried to brush off her worries, hoping that everything was fine with her parents and that they would call her back soon. But when the next day passed without hearing from them, Rhonda's concern grew. She tried calling her parents' cell phones every 30 minutes, but they were now out of service. She also left messages on their home phone, but none of them were returned. Rhonda set out on a solo road trip to check on her mother and stepfather in another state. After a 5-hour drive, she arrived at their house. What struck her as unusual was the absence of a car in the driveway. Things only got stranger from there. As she approached the front door, she found it slightly ajar, an eerie quietness, and a light on in one of the rooms despite the bright sunlight outside. Rhonda called out for her mother and stepfather Reggie, but received no response. She ventured into the kitchen, where she was greeted by a scene that looked like a sudden and mysterious departure. A table was set for two, with food that appeared to have been left untouched for days. The rest of the house was also in disarray, with belongings scattered about and doors and cupboards left open. Adding to the sense of abandonment and unease, their bedroom showed signs of a thorough search, but it was unclear what the person was looking for or who was responsible. On the bedside table, essential medications were left behind, including her mother's cancer pills, which she took 3 times a day, and Reggie's insulin, which he administered hourly. Notably, their cell phones were completely out of battery, rendering them useless. Rhonda quickly realized that her mother and stepfather were unable to leave their home without their essential medications and cell phones. She immediately contacted the police to report the incident, alerting them to the suspicious individuals. They in the car was quickly added to the wanted list, and all bank cards belonging to Carol and Reggie were frozen. The first few days of the search yielded nothing, with no sign of the imposters or any witnesses. However, on June 12, several developments led the police to close in on the perpetrators. A crucial lead emerged when a man, claiming to be Reggie, contacted one of the banks, complaining that his card was blocked and he was unable to withdraw cash. A bank employee grew suspicious when checking the card information and offered to resolve the issue by visiting a nearby branch, but the caller, Mr. Reggie, hung up. Minutes later, a woman called from the same number, claiming to be Mrs. Carroll, and reported a similar problem with her card being blocked. When the bank asked her to visit a branch in person, she refused, citing health issues, and urgently requested access to her savings. Her request was denied. The bank promptly handed over the call details and recordings to the police. The police investigation continued at the station, where they played the suspicious phone calls for Rhonda. She immediately confirmed that the voices did not belong to her Carol and Reggie. In fact, the voices sounded too young to be them. As a result, the authorities believed that the imposters were likely involved in the Carol and Reggie disappearance, either holding them captive or killing them after extracting information about their bank accounts and cards. The search for the missing couple led to a breakthrough a few days later, when their car was discovered abandoned on a remote road in a wooded area. A thorough examination of the vehicle revealed no signs of blood or struggle in the cabin. However, in the trunk, experts found hair and sweat marks that belonged to they. This suggested that they had been forcibly taken away in the trunk of their own car, leaving little hope for their safe return. The police investigated their bank transactions and found that money had been withdrawn from their account several times after they stopped hearing from their daughter. Reviewing the ATM surveillance footage revealed that the withdrawals were made by a young man who couldn't be identified right away. The police also requested a trace of all calls made from the phone number used by the imposters to contact the bank. Further investigation showed that the SIM card used to make those calls was purchased on a prepaid plan just before they disappeared. Unfortunately, the buyer's identity couldn't be determined, but it was discovered that the number was used to call a car rental company on June 6. Additionally, it was found that someone staying at a hotel had rented a Mazda RX-8 in the name of Tiffany Cole. Later, the same car was seen at the ATMs where the unidentified young man withdrew money from their accounts. A team of investigators used tracking beacons installed in rental cars to locate a Mazda RX-8, which was found parked at a hotel in Charleston. The car was linked to a couple who had been victimized by thieves, who had withdrawn $1,000 from her card and nearly $3,000 from her husband's card. A capture team was quickly dispatched to the hotel, where they burst into the room where the thieves were staying. The room was found to be filled with numerous packages and receipts from various stores, indicating that the thieves had been on a spending spree, purchasing items such as clothing, electronics, video games, cosmetics, perfumes, and expensive liquor. 3 people were found inside the location, clearly caught off guard by the police visit. Tiffany Cole, 23, her boyfriend Michael Jackson, 24, and Alan Lindell Wade, 19, all appeared surprised, confused, and frightened as police placed handcuffs on their wrists. The trio was taken to the police station, separated into different rooms for questioning, and initially pretended to be unaware of the accusations or refused to speak. A search of the premises uncovered significant evidence, including stolen bank cards, the laptop, some of Carol's jewelry, Reggie's expensive coin collection, the keys to their Lincoln Town car, and pawn shop receipts in Tiffany Cole's name. During the investigation, it was discovered that Tiffany had sold some of the stolen jewelry and spent the money with friends. After several hours of interrogation, Tiffany finally began to talk, bursting into tears as she confessed that she and her friends had robbed the elderly couple but claimed no further harm was done. The group then went on the run, using the stolen money for their own gain. Tiffany also implicated another individual, Bruce Kent Nixon, 19, who was paid $300 for his assistance in the crime. She stated that they never saw Bruce Kent Nixon again after the incident. Bruce Kent Nixon's decision to commit a crime was motivated by a promise of a fixed amount of money, which he quickly spent on illicit substances. As a result, he did not make an effort to hide or flee, living in the same city of Charleston. He was eventually arrested at his parents' home. It began in May 2005, when Tiffany visited the Summers to make a payment on a car she had purchased 6 months prior. The Summers, Carol, and Reggie were known for their hospitality and would often invite Tiffany to stay overnight or for a few days, treating her to good food and gifts. On this particular occasion, Tiffany arrived with her new boyfriend, and they were both welcomed to dinner and invited to stay overnight. During dinner, the Summers discussed their new life, and Carol inadvertently revealed that they had nearly $100,000 left over from the sale of their Charleston home, which they intended to use to enjoy their retirement without financial worries. Unbeknownst to her, Carol's careless comment sealed her in her husband's fate. Tiffany and Michael exchanged a telling glance, and that night, they began secretly plotting to get their hands on the Summers' substantial sum of money. In the morning, Tiffany and Michael bid they farewell and returned to South Carolina. Within a couple of weeks, they recruited accomplices and assigned roles and responsibilities. They then set their plan in motion. On June 6, Tiffany rented an unassuming car. Meanwhile, Bruce Kent Nixon and Alan stole 4 shovels. Together, they drove to the outskirts of Jacksonville, where they identified a secluded spot in the woods and started digging a deep hole, which would ultimately become the Summers grave. On the morning of July 8th, Tiffany purchased rope and duct tape from a hardware store, which she later provided to her accomplices, Bruce Kent Nixon and Alan. That evening, Bruce Kent Nixon and Alan approached the home of their intended victim, pretending to need assistance and asking to use the phone. Despite finding the young men suspicious, the homeowner, Carol, allowed them to enter. As soon as they were inside, they attacked Carol and her husband, who had rushed to her aid, threatening them with a toy gun. The Carol and Reggie was then bound with duct tape, blindfolded, and interrogated about the location of valuable items in the house, including their bank account information and PIN codes. They provided this information in an attempt to save their lives, as they were subjected to torture and death threats. After obtaining the necessary details, 2 additional individuals entered the house, assisting in dragging the Carol and Reggie into the backyard. They was then forced into the trunk of their own car, a Lincoln, which was being driven by Alan and Bruce Kent Nixon. Following behind them in a rented Mazda ARX-8 were Tiffany and Michael. The plan was that if a police patrol intercepted the car carrying the captive couple, a second car would draw the officers' attention away by recklessly speeding or breaking traffic rules. However, no police were encountered, and both cars reached their destination without incident. In the trunk, Reggie managed to free his arm and remove the bandages and duct tape covering his and his wife's faces, allowing them to breathe. However, there was no time to make any further attempts to escape. As the trunk lid opened, the Carol and Reggie was shocked and bewildered to see among their kidnappers Tiffany and her boyfriend, who had visited them recently. The kidnappers led the captive Carol and Reggie several dozen meters through the woods to a pre-dug grave. The Carol and Reggie begged for mercy, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The young kidnappers brutally murdered them by burying them alive. According to Bruce Kent Nixon, the kidnappers spent about an hour burying the Carol and Reggie under earth. Throughout the horrific ordeal, the bound and helpless Carol and Reggie cried, confessed their love for each other, and said their goodbyes. The investigation revealed that the spouses had died from suffocation, with soil found in their mouths, respiratory tracts, and stomachs, indicating they had been buried alive. After committing the heinous crime, the perpetrators abandoned the Lincoln in the woods and returned to town in a rented car. They then went to the Sumner house, where they stole all the valuables they could find, before returning to South Carolina to spend their loot. However, their freedom was short-lived, as the stolen cards were blocked after 2 days, and all participants in the crime were arrested 4 days later. During the trial, Bruce Kent Nixon was the only one who fully admitted his guilt from the beginning and cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a lighter sentence. He led the authorities to the burial site of the spouses and provided a detailed account of the events of that fateful night. In contrast, Tiffany claimed that her boyfriend, Michael, was the mastermind behind the crime, driven by greed after learning about the large sum of money the Sumner family had received from the sale of their house. Tiffany's lawyer argued that she was merely an accomplice and not directly involved in the murder. Michael and Alan chose not to testify, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The jury did not believe Tiffany Cole was innocent because she was involved in planning the crime, rented a car, and created a diversion in case they were chased by police. She also helped dig a grave for the victims and sold stolen items at a pawn shop, using the money to buy clothes and rent a limousine to celebrate their success, as seen in numerous photos. As a result, Bruce Kent Nixon was sentenced to life in prison without parole, while Michael Jackson, Tiffany, and Alan Lindell were given the death penalty. The criminals filed multiple appeals, but they were all denied, and the sentence remained unchanged. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Ann Thompson Harris. Christina Ann Thompson and Jason Thomas Harris, 40, had been married for 11 years as of 2014, having tied the knot in 2003 following a 5-year courtship. The couple welcomed their first child in 2009, which brought about significant lifestyle changes. Despite the challenges that came with parenthood and daily responsibilities, they appeared to be content with their new life. Christina managed the household and cared for their child, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As their child grew older, Christina had the opportunity to contribute to the family income by getting a job. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave due to her second pregnancy. Their daughter was born healthy, but tragically, she would only get to see her mother through photographs as she grew up. On September 29, 2014, Jason had a brief conversation with his wife Christina before leaving for work. Despite being unwell with a cold and severe cough that had disrupted her sleep, Christina reassured Jason she was okay. However, a few hours later, Jason grew concerned when Christina didn't answer his call to check on her. Unsuccessful in reaching his wife, Jason asked a neighbor to visit their home and check on Christina, explaining her condition and unavailability. The neighbor found the front door unlocked, and upon entering the bedroom, discovered Christina lying unresponsive on the bed. The neighbor promptly called 911 and then sought help from another neighbor, a registered nurse, who sadly confirmed Christina's death after checking her pulse. 2 days after Christina's death, the medical examiner determined that the cause was an overdose of a banned substance. This verdict stunned her family and friends, who were convinced she had never touched illegal drugs. Christina's mother, Kathy May, disputed the finding and told the police that her daughter had seemed well when they last met, the day before her death. The police then questioned Jason Harris's claim that his wife was battling a cold. According to Kathy May, Christina had confided in her about the difficulties in her marriage to Jason, who was unhappy but reluctant to divorce due to concerns about child support and custody of their 2 kids. The neighbors who discovered Christina's body provided the police with some interesting information. They claimed that Jason had told them that the night before his wife's death, he had made her a bowl of cereal with milk, and while they were eating, Christina suddenly lost consciousness and dropped the plate. The police were aware that it would be difficult for Christina's loved ones to accept that someone they knew so well had a secret dark side. However, as the investigation progressed, the police began to question whether Christina had indeed taken any illegal substances. Despite the official findings, Christina's family refused to give up, convinced that Jason Harris was involved in her death. Christina's mother and sisters persuaded the police to test her breast milk, which led to a historic first in Michigan, using breast milk as evidence. Despite the trust of her family, neighbors, and colleagues that Christina didn't use illegal substances, her milk was tested. Notably, her workplace and the hospital where she gave birth to her second child had already tested her for prohibited substances, with negative results. At the time of Christina's death, her second child was 4 months old, and she had been breastfeeding. Both Christina's mother and Harris confirmed that she was cautious about her consumption due to breastfeeding, as she didn't want to harm her baby. Christina would express and freeze her breast milk, with some bags stored at her mother's house. The police examined 3 dated bags of frozen milk, which revealed no traces of banned substances. The expert analysis included milk samples frozen shortly before Christina's death, indicating she didn't consume the substance that caused her death. Only one person claimed that Christina had used banned substances, and that was Jason Harris's sister. This led investigators to take a closer look at Jason and consider the possibility that Christina's death was a deliberate act of deprivation of life. The investigation was slow going, and it's unclear how it would have turned out if Christina's family hadn't been actively involved in uncovering the truth. Christina's mother constantly reminded the Davidson police about her daughter, and in August 2016, almost 2 years after Christina's death, Kathy Mays successfully got the Davidson police to hand the case over to the Michigan State Police, with new investigators taking over. As the story unfolded, they discovered a lot of information about Jason Harris's character and behavior before and after his wife's death. Harris had been having multiple affairs, and Christina was aware of them, confiding in family and co-workers that Harris had been texting another woman even while she was in the hospital giving birth to their youngest child via C-section. Christina told a co-worker that if she turned up dead, it would be because of Harris, and when asked if she was serious, she confirmed that she was. Harris told his co-workers that he doubted the paternity of their second child and often complained that after giving birth, Christina was depressed, staying in bed and refusing to go to work. He also frequently complained about her nagging him. One of Harris's co-workers believed that Harris might have told the police that he had expressed a wish for Christina to be dead. He described Harris and Christina's relationship as toxic, recalling that they frequently argued. One of the most astonishing aspects of this case was Jason Harris's openness about wanting to get rid of his wife, Christina. Despite making attempts to harm her, nobody took his words and actions seriously until her death. Harris purchased substances which he mixed into her drinks on at least 2 occasions. However, Christina detected an unusual taste and refused to consume the beverages. He then asked a co-worker for a substance that would not alter the taste or smell of drinks or food, claiming he wanted to knock her out so she wouldn't feel anything. When Harris told a co-worker that Christina didn't drink the tainted water because of its funny taste, the co-worker declined to provide him with more pills. The co-worker testified that Harris had told him he wanted Christina to stop nagging him, but the co-worker thought Harris was joking. Harris even told a co-worker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the hitman was arrested before he could carry out the task. Harris then asked the same co-worker to kill Christina in exchange for $10,000 from her $100,000 life insurance policy. The co-worker refused, believing Harris was venting frustrations and that the offer was merely a poor joke. He remembered the conversation as Harris saying, "I'm tired of her, I'm going to get rid of her." On September 29, 2014, Harris dropped off his 2 children at daycare on his way to work. Later that morning, he sent a text to a neighbor asking her to check on his wife Christina because she wasn't answering his calls. The neighbor arrived at the house and saw the family van in the driveway, but Christina didn't come to the door. The neighbor entered the house and found Christina lying unresponsive in bed. She asked Harris if she should try to wake her up, and he said Christina had probably overslept and that he was on his way home. The neighbor then went back inside and found Christina feeling cold, with foam coming from her mouth and nose. She called 911 and another neighbor who was a registered nurse. The 911 operator asked if there were any needles present, but the neighbor didn't see any. The registered nurse neighbor testified that Christina was cold, stiff, had no pulse, and had white foam coming from her mouth. She didn't attempt to resuscitate Christina because she was already dead. When the paramedics arrived, they pronounced Christina dead at the scene. Harris informed his supervisor that he had requested a neighbor to check on Christina and that he needed to return home because Christina was unresponsive when he arrived at the house. However, witnesses reported that Harris did not appear concerned or rushed, and he entered the house without notifying the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina. Later that morning, Harris contacted Christina's supervisor at work, informing her that Christina had passed away the previous night and inquiring about collecting the $100,000 death benefit on Christina's life insurance policy through her employer. One of the women with whom Harris was intimate told investigators that Harris reached out to her on the day of Christina's death, claiming that his wife had died from taking an excessive amount of a banned substance, implying that he knew the cause of Christina's death before the medical examiner's report. That evening, the neighbor Harris had asked to check on Christina saw him in the driveway. Harris stated that Christina was not the angel her parents thought she was, and that their child would soon learn all the good and bad about Christina. He claimed that Christina had dropped her bowl of cereal and that he told her to go to bed. Harris also told the neighbor that his wife was restless, tossing, turning, and thrashing around during the night, and that he had heard her cough before he left for work, wondering if that had been her last breath. Harris told a police officer that Christina had been coughing a lot when he left the home, and that Christina had fallen asleep while eating cereal the night before her death. Finally, Harris informed Christina's mother that Christina had complained about her water tasting of chemicals before she died. In this case, a key motive was financial gain. Within a week of Christina's death, Harris and his mother personally visited Christina's workplace to ask about her life insurance payout. Moreover, Harris received a $20,000 death benefit from his employer's life insurance policy soon after Christina's death. One of Harris's mistresses moved in with him and his children. Although Christina's mother thought the mistress moved in after the funeral, Harris's neighbor testified that the mistress had already moved in before the funeral. The neighbor also stated that Harris's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the house just days after Christina's death. Police found that Jason Harris had bought a plane ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman he had exchanged over 5,800 texts with. The county medical examiner, Dr. Brian Hunter, sent Christina's post-mortem blood and urine samples to a lab for testing. Initially, Dr. Hunter thought Christina's death was an accident, but there were no needle marks on her body, and investigators didn't find any drug residue or rolling paper near the bed where she died. In 2016, the Michigan State Police took over the investigation into Christina's death. Later, in 2019, after being questioned in a wrongful death lawsuit brought by Christina's family, and after reviewing the police file, Dr. Hunter changed the manner of Christina's death on her death certificate and post-mortem report from accidental to homicide. The police charged Harris with first-degree murder, solicitation of murder, and delivery of a controlled substance causing death. He was refused bail. Nicholas Robinson, Harris's attorney, said his client has pled not guilty to this matter and looks forward to contesting these charges. By the time of his arrest, Harris had lost his job due to a positive test for banned substances. The efforts made by Kathy Mays to ensure that law enforcement agencies punish the perpetrator of her daughter's death did not go unnoticed. Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton said that a few years back, he started receiving Facebook and email messages from a woman from Davidson, claiming that her daughter had recently died and that it was not an accident. The woman, Kathy Mays, was able to capture Layton's attention, and authorities began reviewing the death of her daughter. Kathy Mays recalled the words her daughter's mother wrote in an email. "Mr. Prosecutor, you are my last hope, the last chance we have to see justice through for my daughter. Please help me." Layton stated, "I was, and remain to this day, thoroughly convinced that her daughter's death was not accidental, but rather the result of foul play. However, it was Mays's relentless pursuit of justice for her daughter that ultimately led to this moment, and it is her effort that prompted Layton and his office to present her with the Crime Victim Advocate of the Year award." Mays thanked Layton for the award, presented to her in a room filled with about 40 people. Mays said, "The accused have well-defined rights, but the victim's rights are not so defined. Communicate through email, phone calls, talking to people, and learn the jargon that's coming at you from the professionals. You are your loved one's best advocate." Mays recounted that in September 2014, she received a call informing her that her daughter had not woken up, and instantly she suspected her husband's involvement. Through her journey to becoming a victim's advocate, a role she was previously unaware of, Mays shared the valuable lessons she learned. Victims should not take for granted that an investigation will occur, and even if one does, it's not guaranteed that the investigators will have the necessary expertise in the specific crime they're investigating. It's essential to be proactive rather than passive, when seeking justice for your loved one. Moreover, don't expect to receive regular or progress updates. The trial started in 2021. Prosecutors alleged that Harris intentionally laced his wife's cereal with a prohibited substance, aiming to end her life. He then went to work, waited a few hours, and asked the neighbor to check on Christina Harris, seemingly wanting someone else to discover her lifeless body, thereby diverting suspicion from himself. According to the prosecutor, Harris had multiple motives for killing Christina. He was involved with other women, suspected her of infidelity, doubted the paternity of their second child, and was frustrated with her constant nagging. Harris openly confessed to multiple individuals that he was against divorce, unwilling to pay child support, and unwilling to lose custody of their children. Prior to Christina's death, he confided in a coworker that he wished she would pass away on the morning of her actual death. Harris contacted Christina's employer to inquire about a $100,000 life insurance policy, and during this conversation, he falsely claimed that Christina had died the previous night. The jury was presented with conclusive proof that Harris wanted Christina dead and had even attempted to hire an assassin. He had devised a plan to achieve this and was aware of where to obtain illegal substances. In fact, he repeatedly purchased these substances with the intention of administering them to Christina. Multiple witnesses testified during the trial that Christina refrained from recreational drug use and was meticulous about what she consumed, given her breastfeeding responsibilities. Furthermore, tests on her frozen breast milk yielded negative results for the substances, lending credence to the theory that Harris had contaminated Christina's food. Prosecution presented the results of the toxicological examination, and Dr. Judge stated that Christina's death was compatible with swallowing a substance. The prosecution dismissed the possibility of an injection because there were no injection marks or a needle found. Dr. Judge added that it was also unlikely that the substance was snorted, as neither a rolled-up dollar bill nor any paper used for this purpose was found at the scene. Jason Harris was given the opportunity to address the court, but he failed to apologize or express remorse. Instead, he maintained his innocence. The jury, however, saw through his deception and revealed him to be a selfish, murderous, and dishonest individual, as the judge remarked on November 17, 2021. The jury ultimately found 47-year-old Harris guilty on all charges brought against him. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced Harris to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Undeterred, Harris proceeded to appeal the verdict. In a statement, prosecutor David Layton extended his sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Christina Harris, describing the case as tragic and hoping that the verdict would bring some measure of comfort as they continued to mourn. Harris requested a new trial, citing his trial lawyer's ineffective assistance. Specifically, he argued that his lawyer failed to obtain an independent expert opinion on the prosecution's evidence and did not consult with an independent toxicologist. The lawyer's trial strategy had been to show that Dr. Hunter's opinion on the manner of death was based on flawed information. The prosecution responded by submitting an affidavit from Jason Harris's trial lawyer, who clarified that he had chosen not to obtain an independent expert opinion to counter the prosecution's expert witness. Instead, his strategy was to highlight that Dr. Hunter had altered his opinion on the manner of death due to being presented with inaccurate information and circumstances over a 3-year period, which was influenced by pressure from the victim's family. In February 2024, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Jason Harris's conviction, and as a result, he will spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger, a 30-year-old store clerk, worked at Delia's in the Mall of America. She was dedicated to her job and never missed a shift. So when she failed to show up for work on February 23, 2013, her coworkers became worried. They attempted to contact her, but she didn't respond to their calls or texts, prompting them to report her missing to the police. Born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, Kira was the daughter of Marcy and Jay Steger, who described her as lively, dedicated, and sweet. She had previously worked at Wet Seal before moving to Delia's, both located in the Mall of America. Kira's coworkers were not only her friends but also part of her extended family. Kira had a unique gift for identifying people's hidden strengths, and she had planned a promising future for herself, one that seemed bright and serene. However, all her dreams came to an abrupt end when she mysteriously disappeared. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira worked a shift. According to her coworkers, she was in high spirits and had plans to dine at a nice restaurant with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, after her shift ended. The two had met 3 years prior and quickly developed a romantic connection, leading to their marriage. By all appearances, Kira and Jeffrey were a happy, stable married couple. However, when Kira failed to show up for work 2 days later, on Saturday, February 23rd, her co-workers were alarmed. This was unusual behavior for someone who was typically punctual, strict with herself and others, and adhered to her schedule. Unable to reach Kira, her co-workers contacted Jeffrey, but he claimed to have no knowledge of his wife's whereabouts. Jeffrey reported that Kira had left their house the previous morning and hadn't returned since. Although this wasn't entirely unusual, as Kira sometimes stayed away for a day or two at a friend's or relative's place without warning, the bad weather that day did raise some concerns. The heavy snowfall might have caused her to get stuck, and her cell phone battery could have run out. Still, with no news from Kira, Jeffrey filed a missing persons report and contacted her family that same day. Her family was shocked and devastated by her sudden disappearance. Detectives promptly began their investigation, a standard procedure in cases like this. They started by interviewing the spouse and searching the immediate area. The detectives went to Jeffrey's home to talk to him. Jeffrey told them that on Thursday, he and Kira had planned to spend some time together. They had dinner, chatted, went bowling, and eventually left the mall. According to Jeffrey, they went straight home, as Kira wanted to watch a movie. Jeffrey also informed the detectives that Kira left their house the next day, Friday, around 8:30 a.m., to attend a work event where her presence was required. He wasn't alarmed by her occasional disappearances, although he didn't know her whereabouts or who she was with, as this was not unusual behavior for her. Jeffrey revealed that he and his wife Kira had been experiencing relationship issues for a few months, but he didn't consider it a major concern, believing that all families have minor disagreements. When the detective asked if Kira might be staying with someone, suggesting she could have had an affair, Jeffrey dismissed the idea, stating that he had already asked Kira about it and she had denied it. Jeffrey emphasized that he genuinely loves and trusts his wife. The investigators shared the information they gathered about Kira and her car with the on-duty patrol units. The detectives also visited the Mall of America to verify the accuracy of Jeffrey's statement and potentially uncover more clues. Mall of America, one of the world's largest shopping malls, is located in Bloomington and boasts 520 stores, theme parks, an oceanarium, movie theaters, a golf course, and many other attractions. Given its massive size, it's no surprise that the mall is equipped with numerous security cameras. When the detectives reviewed the security footage from February 21st, they saw that Kira had left work at her usual time. The footage didn't show anything unusual, and Jeffrey's alibi checked out. He had met Kira after work, and they had spent some time together at the mall before heading to the parking lot and driving off. There was no sign of any argument between them, and it seemed like they had a normal evening. The waiting game was agonizing, and with each passing day, the anxiety about Kira's safety grew. With no news from her and exhausted from waiting, Kira's family decided to take matters into their own hands and traveled to Bloomington to assist with the investigation. They printed flyers with Kira's picture and posted them around town, handing them out to passersby in an effort to draw attention to the search. They knew they couldn't just sit idle. They had to do everything possible to find their loved one. While Kira's family was distributing leaflets, investigators continued to question the couple's neighbors. They noticed a surveillance camera on one of the houses, which rotated sideways and captured Kira and Jeffrey's home. The officers asked the homeowner to provide a copy of the footage, hoping to find some clues. Meanwhile, records from Kira's cell phone company arrived, providing a new lead. According to the records, Kira had a relationship with Ryan Wendt, who was the manager of the store chain where she worked. They had an intense and frequent correspondence. The police discovered that Ryan had left the state around the same time Kira disappeared, and he was traveling in his car towards Colorado while a search for Kira was underway. Ryan became a key figure in the investigation, not only because of his romantic relationship with Kira, but also because he had left the state at the same time she vanished. Whether this was a coincidence or something more, the investigators needed to find out. Regardless, the detectives were able to get in touch with Ryan, and he agreed to be questioned in Colorado. During the questioning, he said that the last time he had contact with Kira was when he was driving through South Dakota, and they exchanged text messages. These messages were sent just before Kira vanished. The detectives examined the timing of the text messages and discovered that Kira was communicating with her new lover at the same time she was having dinner with her husband, Jeffrey. It was obvious from their conversation that Kira was growing more and more distant from Jeffrey. Ryan's phone was analyzed to track his location in relation to cell towers, and his credit card statements were reviewed. The evidence suggested he was out of state on the night in question and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. As a result, he was cleared and removed from the suspect list. An examination of the text message timestamps showed that Kira was still communicating with Ryan even after arriving home with her husband. However, their conversation ceased at 11:44 p.m., and Kira's phone has been inactive since then. Meanwhile, a different team of investigators prepared to analyze the video footage from the surveillance camera installed at Kira's neighbor's house. The camera captured a wide area of the street, panning left and right, but its rapid movement made observation challenging. Whenever an investigator thought they spotted something suspicious, the camera would quickly swing to the other side, making it hard to focus. As a result, Jeffrey and Kira's house was only visible for a brief few seconds, caught in a quick glimpse as the camera panned to the right. Jeffrey claimed that after dinner and bowling, he and Kira went home, watched a movie, and then went to bed. However, video footage showed that at around 2 a.m., Kira's car backed into their yard. Although the poor quality of the footage and the camera's constant motion made it difficult to determine exactly what was happening. The car soon drove away from their house. According to Jeffrey, he had driven Kira's car that night because she had asked him to fill up the gas tank before her commute the next day. Surprisingly, his alibi checked out, as he was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 in the morning. However, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home, instead heading towards the highway. His destination remained unknown. The neighbor's camera did not capture Jeffrey's return home, but this does not necessarily mean he didn't come back. The camera was constantly rotating, so it's possible that it was facing the other direction when Jeffrey arrived. Upon closer examination of the footage, investigators noted that Kira's Chevrolet was seen driving away at 9:21 a.m. However, unfortunately, the footage did not provide a clear view of who was driving the vehicle. A police report was filed on Saturday, February 23rd, after Kira was reported missing. On Monday, February 25th, the police received a call about a suspicious vehicle found near the shopping center where Kira worked. The vehicle was parked in one of the two multi-story parking lots, and security guards had noticed it had been there for several days. They requested a truck to remove it. The tow truck driver proceeded to examine the car before picking it up and spotted suspicious-looking red smudges on the trunk lid, then called the police. That vehicle turned out to be Kira's white Chevy. There wasn't that much blood, just a few small stains, but it was there, and that was a very bad sign. Kira's purse was found in her abandoned car, containing divorce court forms that appeared to have been downloaded from the internet. Behind the car, a small, dark item lying in the snow caught the investigators' attention. Upon closer inspection, they discovered a rolled-up trunk mat with dark-colored stains on the reverse side. DNA testing confirmed that the stains were Kira Steger's blood. With a heavy heart, the investigators realized that Kira was likely deceased. This devastating discovery was a cruel shock to her family and friends, who had lost their last hope of seeing her again. Many questions now plagued their minds. How did Kira die? Did she suffer? And who could have harbored such resentment towards her as to take her life? The absence of Kira's body only added to their anguish, making it even harder to come to terms with their sorrow. The detectives' primary focus shifted to identifying the individual who abandoned the vehicle in the parking lot. After leaving the house at 9:21 a.m., the car was captured on camera at the mall approximately 20 minutes later. Although there were no cameras in the lot where the car was found, a nearby camera monitored the path leading to it. Upon reviewing the footage, detectives noticed a hooded man appearing in the video a few minutes after the white Chevrolet entered the parking lot. Given the cold weather, the hoodie didn't seem unusual, but the detectives wanted to track his movements. The footage showed the hooded man crossing the street, engaging in a brief conversation with a taxi driver at the stand, and then getting into the taxi and driving away. The police easily identified the company that owned the taxis parked in the shopping center's parking lot. By analyzing the time the hooded man interacted with the driver, they quickly determined the license plate number of the specific vehicle involved. Since all the cabs were equipped with GPS tracking devices, the police were able to trace the hooded man's journey, which ended a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house. He got out of the car after paying cash, and the taxi left the neighborhood. The same camera that had previously recorded part of Kira and Jeffrey's home caught a cab on film. 2 minutes into the footage, a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt with a distinctive white logo entered the frame. Although the low-quality footage made it difficult to make out his face, the logo on his hoodie stood out. As the investigators continued to review the footage, they saw the hooded man walk into the house where Kira and Jeffrey lived. Given that Kira was missing, it was highly likely that the hooded man was Jeffrey. After obtaining a search warrant, law enforcement officers went to the house. At first, the house seemed ordinary and unremarkable, but a closer inspection revealed a more sinister scene. In the bedroom, the criminalists found dark red stains on the wall beside the bed and around 100 similar stains on the mattress. It was clear that the room had been recently rearranged and cleaned in an attempt to conceal evidence. When the forensics team used luminol on the floor carpet, it revealed a significant amount of blood stains that were not visible to the naked eye. These stains started in the bedroom and continued to the other side of the house. The forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Kira, which further led investigators to believe that she was no longer alive. In addition to searching the interior of the house, the police also inspected Jeffrey's car. Although they didn't find any blood or signs of a struggle inside the vehicle, they did discover something noteworthy. A gas station receipt was found in the car, which showed that the purchase was made an hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned in the mall parking lot, and the payment was made using Jeffrey's card. The detectives then went to the gas station to review the security footage. The footage showed Jeffrey filling up his car and then going inside to withdraw cash from an ATM. This video provided a clear view of Jeffrey's face and revealed a logo on his jacket, similar to the one seen on the man in the earlier footage, located in the chest area. Based on this recording and all evidence found in the house, 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He was taken to the station for questioning and became the main and only suspect. From the interrogation room, Jeffrey contacted his attorney, who advised him to exercise his right to remain silent. Although the police had sufficient evidence to charge him, the most crucial evidence of his guilt would be Kira's body. There was no doubt that Kira was dead. The police, along with Kira's family and volunteers, spent months searching for her. In late March, as the snowdrifts began to clear, a strange bag was discovered by volunteers near the roadside at Keller Lake, which is just a few miles from Trevino's house. The police were called, and upon inspection, the bag was found to contain a bloodied pillow, a shirt, and a bra. The forensics team was able to link the discovery to Kira, as her DNA was detected on the items. Although the lake was still partially frozen, which made searching it difficult, divers were able to survey the water body. However, they did not find any remains in the lake. The area surrounding the lake was thoroughly searched multiple times using 4 trained search dogs, but no evidence of Kira's whereabouts was found. Over 2 months later, on May 8, 2013, the St. Paul Police Department received a chilling call. The caller reported seeing what appeared to be a dead body in the Mississippi River. The body retrieved by police from the water was confirmed to be Kira Steger. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered severe, blunt force trauma to her forehead and a fractured left index finger. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the medical examiners could not determine the exact cause of death. Investigators worked to piece together the events leading up to Kira's death and its aftermath. Their theory was that upon returning home, Jeffrey discovered Kira texting someone else. When she refused to show him the messages, he forcibly took her phone, breaking her finger in the process. Enraged by the romantic exchange, Jeffrey allegedly snapped, taking Kira's life, and then attempting to conceal the evidence of his crime. Jeffrey drove Kira's car to their house, put Kira's body in the trunk, then stopped at a gas station before driving to the river, where he got rid of the body. Afterwards, he drove back home, throwing away the bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes on the way. The next morning, he went to another gas station, withdrew cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a taxi after leaving Kira's car in the mall's parking lot. In October 2013, a jury found 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino guilty, ruling that his actions were not premeditated and that the crime resulted from a sudden and intense argument sparked by Kira's infidelity. Before the sentence was announced, Kira's family expressed their grief and outrage, with her sister calling Trevino a calculating criminal who didn't deserve mercy, and her mother saying he had callously dumped her daughter's body into the country's most polluted waterway. In November 2013, Jeffrey Trevino received a 27.5-year prison sentence, becoming eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988, in Brick Township, the youngest of 5 children in her family. When her parents divorced, she went to live with her father, but remained close to her siblings, particularly her sister Brianna, who was 4 years older. In school, Brittany was an outstanding student, and her teachers believed she had the potential to become a scholar. However, her unusual dream was to become a forensic scientist and study crime scene evidence. As the baby of the family, Brittany relished the extra attention she received. Her mother acknowledged that she was spoiled, but not vain or arrogant. For her 16th birthday in April, she held her mother to a promise to let her get her belly button pierced. Brittany was a big fan of pop star Britney Spears and had posters of her in her bedroom. She enjoyed watching cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants. Her fascination with forensic science led her to watch TV shows about the subject, a profession she wanted to pursue. Brittany and her mother would often watch the same shows together and then call each other to discuss them. In 2004, Brittany, 16, and her sister, Brianna, 20, lived with their father, Joe Dunn, and his new girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house close to their school. Located at the end of the street, the house was near a wooded area. At that time, Brittany had been dating John Fitzgerald, 18, for almost 2 years. He was a nice guy who had the approval of Brittany's family, and they had a very warm relationship, making them seem like the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittany's mother, Deborah, and her sister Brianna drove to South Toms River, about 15 miles from Brittany's home, to visit her older brother and his wife, who had recently had a baby girl. That evening, around 8:30 p.m., Brittany called her mother on her cell phone, asking for a ride to her boyfriend John's house. Brittany sounded very upset, suggesting there might be trouble. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive her, but said that her sister Brianna could arrive in about an hour. Brittany agreed to wait. About 45 minutes after Brittany phoned, Brianna was finally free to call her back, but Brittany didn't pick up. Brianna assumed that Brittany must be sleeping or that someone had taken her to John's, which is why she wasn't answering. However, when Brianna got back home the next morning, she was surprised to find that Brittany was nowhere to be found, although all of her belongings, including her phone, were still at the house. Brianna suspected that Brittany might have spent the night at her boyfriend's house, but it was unusual that she hadn't mentioned it to anyone and had left her cell phone behind. This wasn't typical of Brittany. Seeking answers, Brianna began calling all of Brittany's friends to see if anyone had information about her whereabouts, but none of them knew anything. After failing to reach her sister, Brianna decided to call John, who told her he last spoke to Brittany on Sunday morning, and they hadn't been in touch since. Lori Peterson, a family friend who lived with the girls, reported that she returned home around 10 p.m. on Sunday night, but Brittany was nowhere to be found. Brianna immediately sensed something was wrong and went to the police station to file a missing persons report. At first, the police were skeptical, thinking Brittany had likely run away or was out with friends. However, Brianna convinced them that she had already contacted all of Brittany's friends and her boyfriend, and none of them knew her whereabouts. Brianna was certain her sister wouldn't run away from home because she was an exemplary student who spent most of her time in the library. Brittany always notified her family before leaving the house, and all her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. After Brianna persuaded the police that her sister couldn't have disappeared on her own, they launched an investigation. The officers first searched Brittany's room at home, inspecting her belongings, including her purse with her phone, ID, and makeup. Although they didn't find any suspicious evidence, they still interviewed everyone living in the house and ruled out the possibility that someone close to Brittany was involved in her disappearance. The police launched a thorough search of the area surrounding the house, checking every nearby residence, scouring the property, and interviewing neighbors. Their goal was to find potential witnesses who might have seen or heard anything unusual. As they surveyed the scene, they noted the house's location at the end of the street, as well as the wooded area directly across the street. During their canvassing, none of the neighbors reported anything suspicious, except for one woman who recalled seeing Brittany walking down the street toward her own house late on Friday night, when it was already dark. Although this sighting occurred 2 days before Brittany's disappearance, investigators took note of it, recognizing it as a curious detail that didn't quite fit the image of the modest, bookish girl who rarely ventured out without her parents' permission. This raised questions. What had prompted Brittany to venture out so late, and was she actually allowed to do so? The police were eager to determine whether Brittany was as innocent and homebound as her sister had described her. Numerous police interviews with Brittany's family, neighbors, and teachers revealed that everyone spoke highly of her, with no one having anything bad to say. In her conversation with the police, Brianna mentioned that Brittany and her boyfriend, John, had a strained relationship lately with frequent arguing. On the day of her disappearance, the couple had another fight, leaving Brittany upset and wanting to visit John that evening to make amends. As a result of their investigation, the detectives decided to scrutinize John's alibi more thoroughly. They asked him to come to the police station to determine if he had seen Brittany on the day she vanished. John stated that his last phone conversation with Brittany was on Sunday morning when he was at the beach with friends. At that time, Brittany was upset that he had gone without her, and they had an argument. They hadn't spoken since then. John also revealed that he had ended their relationship a few days prior, but she couldn't accept it, even though she knew he was already dating another girl. John claimed he had no plans to meet Brittany that night and wasn't aware she was coming to his house. The reason for their breakup was a rumor that Brittany had kissed another guy at a party. Although John didn't see it himself, he decided to end the relationship and started dating another girl. John last saw Brittany on July 10th, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter expressing her desire to reconcile. The detectives asked John for permission to review the letter Brittany had written, and he handed it over. In the letter, Brittany apologized for her behavior and for breaking John's heart. She also asked him to remain friends. John seemed genuinely concerned and worried that Brittany hadn't been found yet. The police had no evidence linking John to Brittany's disappearance, and after he passed a lie detector test, he was cleared of suspicion. However, John did tell detectives one important detail. He said that Brittany often came to his house through the woods behind her father's house. The story of Brittany's disappearance grew increasingly complex. Detectives started to speculate whether Brittany had attempted to reach John's house, about a mile from her father's house, by walking through the woods that night. Given the darkness, she could have easily gotten lost or encountered difficulties along the way. The police launched a search in the woods, focusing on the path that began near her house and which she likely took. Walking in the woods at night was frightening and perilous, raising the question of why a young girl like Brittany wasn't intimidated by the prospect. The forest search continued for 3 days, but yielded no results. Just when the investigation seemed stuck, a woman came forward who had been with her brother in a nearby park on the night Brittany vanished. The park was quiet and deserted, with no cars present, except for a distinctive Chevrolet pickup truck that drove by. The woman noticed the truck, even recalling its license plate. Following a thorough investigation, authorities discovered the truck was registered to 23-year-old Anthony Geiger. To establish a connection between Anthony and Brittany's disappearance, police delved into his past, revealing that he was the former boyfriend of Brittany's sister, Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe explained to detectives that she and Anthony split about a month prior due to his excessive jealousy and obsessive focus on her sister Brittany. She suspected Anthony, 23, harbored feelings for Brittany, which led her to ultimately terminate their relationship. Brittany's friends recalled that Anthony always had a strange way of looking at her and would frequently try to flirt with her. The most recent instance of this behavior was at lunch, where Anthony once again attempted to flirt with Brittany. As a result, detectives began to suspect Anthony of kidnapping Brittany and decided to bring him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Anthony claimed that he was not in the area where Brittany lived on the evening of July 11th. He stated that he didn't arrive until the next day, July 12th. By which time the police had already started searching for the missing girl. Anthony admitted to being on good terms with Brittany and seeing her at social gatherings, but maintained that they were just friends and that he never flirted with her. He also stated that he was aware that Brittany was too young for him and that his feelings towards her were purely platonic. Anthony testified that he spent the evening of July 11th at home with his new girlfriend, who corroborated his alibi. Despite this, investigators remained suspicious of Anthony, partly because his residence was near Brittany's home. Investigators went back to examine the letter Brittany had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she was saying goodbye to her loved one. They began to fear that Brittany might be hurting herself after breaking off her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Brittany's parents rejected this version, believing that their daughter was smart and determined and would not give up her grand plans because of her breakup with her boyfriend. They believed Brittany was too in love with life. After the investigation stalled once more, the police turned to the media to seek help from the public in finding potential witnesses. To bolster their efforts, officers from other areas joined the investigation. Frustrated with waiting, Brittany's parents took an active role in the search, going door to door in the neighborhood, asking questions, although this approach yielded no results. The police refocused their attention on Brittany's home, where everything began. Even if she had indeed walked through the woods to meet her boyfriend, it was puzzling that she had left her phone behind in her room. Could someone have abducted her from the house itself? If so, was it someone she knew and trusted? During a meticulous search of the house, the police discovered a crucial piece of evidence in Brittany's room: her personal diary, containing a handwritten letter. The contents of this letter proved vital to the investigation, lifting the shroud of secrecy surrounding the family's relationships. Brittany wrote about her life in a letter, describing her relationships with friends and her boyfriend, as well as her schooling. She also shared details about her family, explaining that it was dysfunctional. Every Sunday, she visited her older brother, who was in jail. Her mother was a drug addict who had abandoned her when she was just 9 years old. Now Brittany lived with her father, with whom she was not close, and his girlfriends. Brittany admitted that she wasn't perfect and had done things she wasn't proud of. However, she was determined not to follow in her parents' footsteps and wanted to succeed in life. Her dream was to become a forensic scientist and help solve crimes. After reading the letter, the police widened their search to include Brittany's family, who had not previously been suspected. Detectives began investigating each family member and discovered that a male massage parlor was operating from Brittany's home. Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittany's father, was offering intimate services to different men every day, masquerading as a massage therapist. Neighbors were aware of this, and Lori herself didn't hide it, distributing business cards in the area. Neighbors reported that Brittany's father's house was a frequent gathering spot for suspicious individuals who would use illegal substances. This led the police to believe that the home environment was dysfunctional. Multiple men, mostly unknown to Lori, would visit her for her services, raising the possibility that one of them might have kidnapped Brittany from the house. Over 100 police officers worked to identify everyone who had visited Joe Dunn's house in the past month, a challenging task. A week after Brittany's disappearance on July 18th, the police announced they had arrested a murder suspect, stunning Brittany's family, who were still searching for her since her body had not been found. When Brittany's mother, Deborah, saw a picture of the suspect on television, she recognized him as her longtime friend, 38-year-old Jack Jr. He had been a close family friend for 20 years, attending all their family gatherings. In fact, his daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who was currently in prison. Deborah was stunned, unable to comprehend how Jack could be involved in Brittany's case, given his close relationship with their family and his children's friendship with Brittany. Despite this, they still held out hope that Brittany was alive. However, court records and interviews revealed that Jack was a hardened criminal with a history of threatening his neighbors throughout his adult life. He had been arrested over a dozen times in the last 10 years alone and had served time in state prison for theft and parole violations. His numerous crimes included breaking into cars, houses, and garden sheds, as well as drug use and sales. He had even threatened a man with a baseball bat and fought with police. Many of his offenses went unreported, as people were afraid of him. The last time Jack was sentenced, he received 5.5 years in prison and was released just a year before Brittany's disappearance. Although Brittany's parents suspected that Jack might steal from them to fund his drug habit, they never thought he was capable of harming their daughter. After Jack's arrest, the details of how the police connected him to Brittany's disappearance came to light. It started with a call to the police station. The caller reported that a few days prior he had met Jack, who had confided in him about back pain he was experiencing due to burying a girl's body in sandy soil. Jack boasted that the burial site would never be discovered and asked for advice on how deep to bury the body to avoid attracting animals. The police asked the informant to come to the station and suggested he wear a wire to meet with Jack. Jack and questioned him about the crimes, including the murder. The informant agreed, and during the meeting, Jack revealed that he had buried the girl's body in a secluded area, claiming it would never be found. Although he admitted to committing the murder, he refrained from mentioning Brittany's name. In addition, Jack revealed his intention to eliminate someone who possessed too much knowledge, gesturing towards his friend Tommy, who was present in the car but didn't overhear the conversation. This led the detectives to believe that Tommy held crucial information that could crack the case, since Jack wouldn't have wanted to silence him otherwise. The detectives brought Tommy in for questioning at the station, but he refused to cooperate, claiming he knew nothing. However, the detectives were certain he was lying, and to prove their point, they played a recording of Jack stating he wanted to kill Tommy due to his knowledge. Realizing he was in danger, Tommy decided to collaborate with the authorities. According to Tommy, on the night Brittany vanished, he and Jack were driving around the neighborhood, smoking crack. They stopped in front of Brittany's house, and Jack decided to enter the house to discuss some matters with her father. When he entered, the house was empty except for Brittany. 5 minutes later, Jack returned to the car with Brittany, who sat in the back seat. Tommy was perplexed and asked what was happening, but Brittany remained silent, gazing downward. Jack informed him that he would take Tommy home. Tommy alleged that Jack drove him home, and when he exited the car, Brittany, who was sitting in the back, also got out and moved to the front passenger seat. Subsequently, Tommy and Jack drove away. The next day, when they met again, Jack didn't mention the previous day's events. They stopped at a car wash, where Jack gave his car an unusually thorough cleaning, washing both the interior and exterior. The car wash attendant joked about this, but Jack became angry, warning him to mind his own business or face the consequences. Tommy later explained that when he heard about Brittany's disappearance, he suspected Jack might be involved. He asked Jack directly what he had done with the girl. Jack became furious at the question, claiming he had simply driven her home and left. He rudely told Tommy not to ask again if he didn't want trouble. Tommy assumed that Jack had taken Brittany to the woods to rape her, believing that Jack had originally planned to use Laurie's intimate services that night, but was thwarted when she wasn't at home. The detectives knew they had found their man when they arrived to arrest Jack. He was holding a can of gasoline, looking like he was about to set his car on fire, likely to destroy evidence. A search of the car revealed bloodstains, which forensic tests confirmed belonged to Brittany. Further investigation showed that Jack had visited a car wash after being with Brittany, and the police seized the vacuum cleaner he used. Criminologists found sand particles stuck together with Brittany's blood inside the vacuum, leaving no doubt about its origin. Although the police had gathered strong evidence, Jack refused to admit to kidnapping and murdering Brittany and remained silent about the case. The detectives interviewed Jack's acquaintances, and most of them believed he was capable of murder, describing him as a man who would stop at nothing. Despite being unemployed, Jack always seemed to have money. During the investigation, a patrol officer reported seeing a car parked on the side of the road near the woods on the night of Brittany's disappearance. The car belonged to Jack. At the time, the officer was unaware that Brittany was missing. When questioned, Jack claimed he was searching for his dog, which had run off into the woods. This information led the search for Brittany's body to focus on the area where the officer spotted Jack's car. Despite an extensive search involving police officers, K-9 units, helicopters, and volunteers, no body was found. Investigators theorized that Brittany, desperate for a ride to her boyfriend's house that night, asked Jack for a lift when he arrived at her home. Jack agreed to drive her, but instead, he took his friend Tommy home and then raped and killed Brittany, taking advantage of the situation. To prove this, however, the police needed to find her body. As the police attempted to question Jack and obtain a confession, a new witness emerged. A woman with a troubled past, who had previously been held hostage by Jack for months, called the police. She claimed that if Jack was indeed responsible for Brittany's murder, she might know where he had hidden her body. During her captivity, she had gained intimate knowledge of Jack's habits, frequent haunts, and secrets, which she was willing to share with the police. One day, a woman recounted how the suspect had shown her a location near a power line and told her it was an ideal spot to bury a body, as it was unlikely anyone would ever find it. Initially, the detectives were skeptical, but they began questioning her. She described the site as being in Lakewood, with sandy soil. This detail sparked a memory for the police, as an informant had previously mentioned that the suspect had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in sandy soil. The authorities decided to search the area the woman had described, which was just 3 miles from Brittany's home. Despite conducting an extensive search over several days, they found nothing. However, they persisted, motivated by the similarity between the sand found in the vacuum cleaner used by the suspect at the car wash and the soil in the area. Over 100 people searched the dense forest on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties daily. Finally, on Tuesday, July 27, 2004, 15 days after Brittany was reported missing, her grave was discovered. 3 New Jersey K-9 officers, who had joined the search on the weekend, found her body. The naked body of the young girl was found in a hole, with a necklace bearing her name hanging around her neck. The detectives immediately confirmed it was Brittany's body. The medical examiner performed an autopsy but was unable to determine the exact cause of death due to the decomposition of the body over 2 weeks. The examiner could not rule out strangulation or suffocation, as Brittany had suffered both head trauma and strangulation. Brittany's body showed no clear signs of sexual assault, although the medical examiner did not exclude the possibility of rape having taken place. Jack ultimately decided to accept a plea bargain after consulting with his lawyer. Brittany's family also agreed to the deal to avoid a lengthy and draining trial. According to Jack, Brittany asked him to drop her off at her boyfriend's house, and he agreed. First, he drove Tommy home, and then he planned to take Brittany to her boyfriend's house. But before doing so, he pulled over to the side of the road and started smoking crack. This enraged Brittany, who began yelling at him and slapped him on the arm. This angered Jack, and he started punching Brittany. He admitted to punching her in the face and head at least twice because she tried to intervene and stop him from smoking. After Brittany was beaten, she started making gasping and gurgling sounds. Meanwhile, Jack was getting high as blood flowed from her nose and mouth. When he finally paid attention to her, Brittany had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to get rid of the body. However, the authorities didn't believe his story because the medical examiner found signs of strangulation on Brittany's body that Jack had left out. Additionally, he couldn't explain why Brittany was found without any clothes. The prosecution thought the crime was motivated by sexual intentions, and an Ocean County grand jury accused Jack of murder on February 9, 2005. Jack later admitted to purposely and knowingly causing serious bodily injury that resulted in death on October 18, 2005. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole on January 13, 2006. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Repkina. On April 17, 2017, a caretaker named Russell found a dead body in the Oregon forest. The woman was Anna Repkina, a Russian native who had been shot in the head and had various trash around her body. Russell reported the discovery to the police. Anna Alexieva Repkina, from Chelyabinsk, Russia, came from a respectable family. She was intelligent, hardworking, and had a passion for travel, rock music, cats, and capturing memories through photography. Anna valued love and longed to be loved in return. She aspired to get married, have children, and build a family home. Those who knew her still cherished the memory of her infectious sense of humor, which made her a joy to be around. In 2016, Anna's 7-year relationship with her high school sweetheart came to an end, leaving her heartbroken. However, she refused to give up on her dreams of finding true love. With online dating becoming increasingly popular, Anna decided to take a chance and signed up for several websites. It was on a Russian dating site that she matched with someone who seemed to fit her ideal perfectly. His name was William Hargrove, a 26-year-old from Oregon who worked as a bouncer and mechanic. Interestingly, William had a strong affinity for Russian culture, and he claimed to have fallen for Anna as well. William treated Anna with kindness, frequently praising her. Despite being physically distant, he made an effort to be emotionally present when she needed him. His friends described him as a charismatic, passionate, and likable individual with a great sense of humor. He was a driven person who inspired those around him to pursue their goals. According to his former roommate, William had a remarkable ability to talk his way in or out of any situation. Anna and William communicated daily, and their online relationship rapidly became serious over a few months. They seemed destined to be together, sharing a deep connection. Their common interests, such as enjoying live music and having a similar sense of humor, made them a perfect match, as observed by their friends. Anna and William were very compatible. William was extremely sweet. Despite being separated by continents, he would frequently send her flowers. Soon, they started discussing meeting in person. In December 2016, they decided to take their months-old relationship to the next level. Anna booked a flight to Oregon to see William. However, Anna made a mistake on her first attempt. She accidentally booked a ticket for Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time she realized her error, she had already flown to Maine. Still, she was determined to spend the Christmas holidays with her boyfriend. She corrected her flight issues and arrived in Oregon on time. William picked her up from the airport. Anna and William shared 10 wonderful days together. He took her on guided tours, and they explored the seaside, played in the snow, and snuggled up by the fireplace. He introduced her to his friends, making their time together even more special. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, they joyfully shouted, "Happy New Year," and shared a romantic kiss. For both of them, it was the perfect Christmas, and they both felt they were meant to be together. After Anna's 10-day visit came to an end, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she happily accepted. From that moment on, the two were engaged. However, what Anna was unaware of was that William had been unfaithful to her. He had been secretly involved with Michelle Chavez, his 33-year-old landlady, who was already married with 2 children. William had been renting a room in Michelle's home, and their affair had been ongoing for over a year, even before Anna's visit. In reality, Anna had unknowingly met Michelle, who was posing as William's landlady, and was in fact William's romantic rival. Michelle was aware that her boyfriend, William, had brought his girlfriend, Anna, to her home. She didn't confront them, possibly thinking that William would never leave her or that Anna was insignificant, just like her own husband. Whatever her reason, she kept quiet. However, things became clearer when Michelle discovered the engagement ring. Anna, thrilled with the news, posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, thanks to the algorithm. Michelle was furious, not just because William was engaged to another woman, but because she had planned to leave her husband for him. In a bold move, Michelle took off her wedding ring and handed it to William. The ring was identical to Anna's engagement ring. It was the same one William had recycled. Michelle expressed her anger to William, who repeatedly assured her that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement on March 1st, 2017. Meanwhile, Anna returned to Oregon, preparation in full swing. She had packed her wedding dress in a suitcase and had even resigned from her job, ready to start a new life with her fiancé, William. Michelle grew concerned about the seriousness of Anna and William's relationship, so she decided to intervene. One day, she reached out to Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on. Anna then reported back to William about the conversation with Michelle. However, William dismissed Michelle's concerns, attributing them to jealousy as his ex. Despite this, the couple was determined to move forward with their plans, ignoring Michelle's warnings. They proceeded to schedule their wedding for March 23rd, planning to exchange vows by the seaside. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, and they headed to the beach for the ceremony. However, the officiant failed to show up. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, they returned home, deciding to try again in April. William consistently made it clear to Anna that she was insignificant to him and that he didn't love her. However, Anna refused to accept this. Michelle grew tired of the situation and decided to intervene. On April 15th, Michelle gave William an ultimatum. He had to choose between her and Anna. He couldn't continue to lead both women on. Michelle also issued a stark warning. If Anna wasn't gone by April 20th, she would take drastic action. Building a snowman was a sinister euphemism for killing someone and hiding their body in a location where it would remain frozen and undiscovered. After Michelle clearly expressed her feelings to William, she was unable to reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna over her. The next day, Sunday the 16th of April, Michelle left voicemails for William in an attempt to convey her emotions. However, William called Michelle to inform her that he was single again, having ended his relationship with Anna. The breakup was messy, but Anna was in the process of returning to Russia. As it happened, William's car had collided with a deer, leaving him stranded at the Ali Murtal store. He asked Michelle to meet him there, which she agreed to, despite being in the middle of a family gathering on Easter Sunday. Michelle left her family's house and drove to the store, where she and William reconnected. They celebrated their rekindled relationship by having sex in William's car on the 17th of April. Anna's body was discovered in the forest at the start of the investigation into her death. The investigators had no idea who she was, as there was no identification on her, and she had only been in the state for about a month. There was no sign of a murder weapon, only litter scattered around her. However, among the trash, a clear plastic bag caught their attention, containing a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a KFC chicken bag. The KFC receipt was the crucial piece of evidence, bearing a date, time, and debit card number. The debit card was traced back to Kevin Thomas, who was subsequently tracked down by the investigators. Kevin revealed that he and William had a weekly habit of getting lunch at KFC every Friday, and the receipt was from a purchase about a week before his questioning. Kevin had been the one to expose William's complicated romantic relationships. The investigation into Anna's death was the only reason William's infidelity had ever come to light. Kevin also recalled that William had borrowed his shotgun, claiming he wanted to go to the woods to blow off some steam. After obtaining Kevin's statement, the police shifted their focus to William and Michelle. William's behavior became increasingly suspicious, as he was caught on camera in stores where he had purchased cigars and Star Wars Legos. He even confided in Kevin that he was splurging on things he couldn't afford in an attempt to lift his spirits. On the 16th, William broke down in tears in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had just dumped him. However, William had actually moved back in with Michelle, and when questioned by the police about his whereabouts on the 16th of April, he falsely stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. When asked about his relationship with Anna, William denied any romance, saying he had met her in Corvallis while out walking, went on 2 dates, but realized it wouldn't work out between them, which ended things between them. William said the last time he saw Anna was in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused trouble for him with his actual partner, Michelle. William was questioned about trash near his late fiancée, Anna Rapina's body. He confessed to littering, but claimed he'd thrown KFC trash away 40 miles from the scene. Investigators were skeptical. When told his trash was found near another murder victim, William was shocked, then asked for a lawyer. He was arrested April 19th for Anna's murder. Michelle was questioned after William's arrest. Initially, she stuck to their rehearsed story, saying they spent the day together. However, under continued questioning, she admitted lying and gave a new account, claiming William was supposed to call and pick her up, but never did. Later, when Michelle was being questioned by the police, they told her that her boyfriend of a year and a half was being held in custody on suspicion of murder. Her response was a simple, "Okay." The investigator found this reaction suspicious and highlighted it, which caused Michelle's emotions to become visible. She started to whimper and attributed her initial lack of reaction to being in a state of shock. William Hargrove was facing trial in October 2019 for murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft, charges that were filed in June 2018. The prosecution sought to have William convicted on all counts, while the defense argued that he was innocent and that Melissa, his burnt lover, was the actual perpetrator. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence against William, highlighting his motive and guilt. It was revealed that William had a second lover, Michelle, who was pressuring him to choose between her and Anna. Furthermore, evidence showed that William had driven with Anna, and his cell phone records placed him near the scene of the crime on the day of her murder, at 4:30 p.m. on Logging Road. The shotgun used to kill Anna was found in William's car, with only his fingerprints on the weapon. Moreover, despite claiming to have no involvement in Anna's death, William was caught using her money to pay off his car insurance, make ATM withdrawals, and go shopping. The prosecution alleged that William had taken Anna to the forest, shot and killed her, and then used her money to pay off his debts, all because he was choosing between Anna and Michelle. The defense argued that their client was innocent and pointed to Melissa as the prime suspect. According to them, Melissa had motives to harm Anna, having previously threatened to build a snowman with her. Furthermore, Melissa's cell phone had been found on the Logging Road just weeks before Anna's murder, suggesting she had likely been in the area to plan the crime. When searched, Melissa's house yielded Anna's cell phone, which implicated her further. Despite this, Melissa was not charged with any crimes and was called as a witness for the prosecution. Melissa took the stand to testify about her relationships, including how she met William and the dynamics between them. As a late-night cab driver, she had met William at the bar where he worked. With her husband's knowledge and consent, she started an affair with William, which grew intense over time. Eventually, William even rented a room in her house to be closer to her. Both her marriage and her relationship with William were open, meaning they allowed each other to have outside relationships. When Anna first appeared, Melissa wasn't interested. However, by Anna's second visit, which seemed like it would be a long-term stay, Melissa was upset, particularly after seeing her own wedding ring on Anna's finger. Although Melissa had given William an ultimatum, she was not involved in his harming Anna. She claimed she never intended for Anna to get hurt or worse, lose her life. Melissa continued to defend herself against the defense's allegations. The threat about building a snowman was a joke, albeit an extreme one, which was a family joke. Her cell phone was indeed found in the forest, but William had driven her there. She had no idea why he did so or what he was planning. Furthermore, William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by the authorities. Melissa's testimony lasted for 14 hours. Besides Melissa, around 70 other people gave testimony, including Anna's mother, William's best friend and roommate, as well as some of Melissa's family members. In her hometown in Oregon, Melissa faced intense scrutiny, with locals criticizing and bullying her. At one point, she even attempted to take her own life, but fortunately, it was unsuccessful. prosecutor praised Melissa's efforts, calling them tough, super tough. After a month of court appearances, the judge asked the jury to deliver a verdict. They deliberated for under 3 hours, finding no evidence linking Michelle to Anna's death, unlike William, and clearing her alibi. William maintained his not guilty plea, but the overwhelming evidence proved conclusive, and he was found guilty on all counts, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. His attorney, however, announced plans to file an appeal. The jurors in Anna's case developed a strong bond during the trial. After the verdict, they were escorted to the logging trail, the site where Anna's body was found, to pay their respects. Anna will be remembered as a brave young woman who left her Russian homeland to build a new life in the United States. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. The Richardson family consisted of Kim and Scott Richardson, who were devoted parents actively involved in their children's lives. Their son Jackson was passionate about football, while their daughter Brooke Skylar, or simply Skylar, was a cheerleader. Skylar struggled with an eating disorder, which had taken over her life from a very young age. Her mother, Kim, first became aware of Skylar's eating habits issues when she was in the 6th grade at just 12 years old. Skylar's fixation on food and exercise became increasingly apparent, such as when she refused to buy gum if it had more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight, which made her struggle even harder. Her obsession with her body image and the constant fear of gaining weight had consumed her. Skylar's battle with weight and body image started when she was a cheerleader. To stay at a certain weight, she began throwing up after eating. However, this harmful habit made her problems worse. After the cheerleading season ended, Skylar's struggle with her weight got even harder. She would have times where she ate too much food in a short time, known as binge eating, and then times where she would hardly eat or follow very strict diets. Skylar's parents saw the change in her behavior and were worried about her health. They tried to talk to her about it, but Skylar would shut them down whenever they brought it up. She didn't want to discuss it, and any attempt to talk about her weight was met with resistance. Frustrated, Skylar's parents looked for professional help from doctors and therapists, hoping they could help their daughter. After an evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a condition characterized by an obsessive focus on a perceived flaw in appearance, often leading to significant distress and impairment in daily functioning. In the summer of 2016, just before her senior year, Skylar started dating her friend's cousin. However, the relationship was short-lived, and by January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, a high school student. At this time, Skylar seemed genuinely happy and was gaining weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, were hopeful that her eating disorder was under control as they noticed her healthy appearance and genuine happiness. In February, Skylar chose her prom dress, a tight-fitting one that required her to be laced into it. A month later, in mid-March, Skylar went on a family vacation, during which she wore a 2-piece swimsuit. Her mom, Kim, thought she looked great. Kim, aware that Skylar and Brandon were getting close, wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills, believing this would protect her daughter's health and prevent unwanted pregnancies. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to get a birth control prescription. Kim waited outside the doctor's office while Skylar met with the doctor. After leaving the examination room, Skylar emerged in tears. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so upset, and Skylar replied that it was a traumatic experience. Unbeknownst to Kim, the real reason behind Skylar's tears was that the doctor had informed her that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor to keep the news secret, as she wasn't ready to share it with her loved ones. 9 days after the incident, Skylar, who was heavily pregnant at the time, attended her prom with her boyfriend Brandon on May 5th. Despite her advanced pregnancy, Skylar was able to fit into her prom gown. 2 months later, On July 14, 2017, the police arrived at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak with Skylar about something she may have witnessed. The police reassured the parents that Skylar was not in any trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what would happen when they got there. The police wanted to ask Skylar some questions about a call they had received from a doctor who specializes in women's health. This doctor's office had reported that one of their patients, a young woman, had given birth to a baby and then buried the baby in her backyard. When they arrived at the police station, the police took Skylar into custody and put her in a room where they would ask her questions. Skylar's father was not allowed to be in the room with her before the interview started. The police then read Skylar her rights and told her about the call they had received from the doctor's office. According to the caller, on April 26th, Skylar had gone to the doctor's office and found out she was pregnant. But when she went back to the office, she told the doctor that the baby was not alive and that she had buried it in her backyard. During her police interview, Skylar confessed to giving birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She revealed that she had delivered the baby in her bathroom, where she discovered the infant wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat. Skylar felt compelled to bury the baby and opted to keep the incident a secret. Without making a sound, Skylar went downstairs, fetched a small garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard. She buried the baby, marking the spot and preserving the memory of her child. Skylar placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. After questioning Skylar, the police informed her parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason she was brought to the station. Kim and Scott were stunned to learn their daughter had been pregnant, as they were completely unaware. Kim was devastated upon hearing the news, saddened that her daughter had endured this ordeal alone. Skylar told her parents she had named the baby Annabelle and said the father was a cousin of a close friend, someone she had briefly dated. Then, crime scene investigators arrived at the Richardson home to search for the baby's remains. The investigators carefully searched the area, removing weeds and brushing the ground to uncover any hidden evidence. Despite the overgrown vegetation, they thoroughly examined every inch of the area. After clearing the weeds and brushing the ground, the police found several bones, including parts of the skull. They carefully collected these remains, placing them in small body bags to preserve any evidence they might hold. The investigators took great care to handle the bones gently, ensuring they remained intact. One investigator recalled that the remains had a strong odor, while another investigator acknowledged that the bones were extremely small, making it challenging to distinguish them from rocks. The coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and tiny fingernails, but no organs or other recognizable features. After being questioned for over 5 hours, Skylar and her parents were permitted to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar, requesting her presence once again. They reassured her father, Scott, that she was not in trouble. During the subsequent interview with Skylar, the police revealed that they had received new information from the coroner's office that contradicted her initial account. The medical examiner who analyzed the remains claimed to have found evidence suggesting that the baby's bones may have been subjected to fire. Skylar was taken aback when the police told her that her baby had been burned. She strongly denied starting a fire, insisting that she would never harm her child. However, the police were convinced that Skylar was guilty of killing her baby girl and trying to destroy the evidence by burning her remains. They suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby's body to get rid of it, but this idea only confused Skylar further. She remained adamant that she hadn't burned the baby. But then Skylar changed her story. She told the police that she did have a lighter and might have used it to try to cremate her baby's remains. She also revealed that the baby might have been born alive, as it had made a sound, possibly even cried, on one occasion. Skylar admitted to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a 1-hour interrogation, the police collected enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed that Skylar had suffocated the baby. After presenting their case to a grand jury, Skylar was eventually indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, a charge that carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to the additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and putting children in danger. She spent the weekend in jail until her family could secure a $50,000 bond. Following the tragic death of her child, Skylar found herself at the center of a fierce media storm. From the moment her name was made public, the public judged and scrutinized everything she and her family did. The constant judgment and scrutiny had a severe impact on their well-being, leading them to retreat to the safety of their own home. However, even there, they received threats that made it difficult for them to venture outside, and the public would take pictures of them, further fueling the frenzy and adding to the immense pressure they faced. The public scrutiny became overwhelming, affecting every part of their lives. Although Skylar's defense attorneys thought she had given a false confession and the baby's death was an accident, the prosecution refused to change their approach. Despite new evidence that didn't support their first conclusion, they continued with their case. A key piece of evidence was the medical examiner's initial report, which said the remains were burned. However, after re-examining the evidence, the medical examiner withdrew this statement, saying there was no proof of burning. Even with this new information, the prosecution didn't change their approach. They focused on Skylar's admission that she had tried to cremate the remains, even though the evidence didn't support their theory of a burned body. This showed the state's determination to get a conviction, regardless of the evidence. Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear from public scrutiny and threats, making daily life unbearable. Her defense team worked tirelessly to prepare her case. Though they raised $50,000 for bail, Skylar's release came with an ankle monitor, keeping her mostly homebound and isolated. Over a period of 12 months, Skylar's life underwent a drastic change. She had to put her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati on hold while she waited for her trial, having been accused of murdering her baby. The charges against her were severe, and her defense team filed a motion to have the trial transferred to a different county. However, the request was denied, which meant Skylar had to face the trial in the original jurisdiction. Skylar felt overwhelmed by her situation, struggling to cope with the emotional toll of the allegations and feeling isolated. Her dogs became her main comfort, providing companionship as she awaited trial. Despite the challenges, her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and supporting her fight for freedom. In July 2019, the state made an unexpected offer to Skylar's defense attorney. The offer was that if Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, which had a 15-year sentence, the state would drop the charge of aggravated murder. Skylar's parents were torn about this decision and wondered if she should take the deal. After thinking it over carefully, Skylar decided to reject the plea deal. This decision scared her parents, who questioned whether she had made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision to make, not theirs. On September 3, 2019, Skylar stood trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. In their opening statements, the prosecution presented a text message Skylar had sent to her mother, in which she expressed happiness and mentioned that her belly had already returned to its normal size, just a few hours after giving birth. The prosecution argued that this message, along with others she sent to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, suggested that Skylar was relieved about the baby's death, and pointed to these texts as evidence that she was involved in the baby's death. The prosecution also alleged that Skylar had searched online for how to get rid of a baby, and that her mother, Kim, had warned her that her life would be over if she became pregnant, which had apparently frightened Skylar. According to the prosecutor, Skylar was determined to keep her pregnancy a secret, and when she could no longer conceal her daughter, she took her daughter's life. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on Skylar's baby testified. She concluded that the baby died from a violent homicide, but couldn't determine if the skull fractures occurred before or after death. Instead, she based her opinion on Skylar's statements during the police interrogation. Skylar's defense attorney questioned the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been influenced by confirmation bias. The attorney argued that the doctor had already formed an opinion and wasn't likely to change it during cross-examination. The doctor acknowledged that she didn't examine the baby's remains under a dissecting microscope. The attorney asked if she had consulted an obstetrician, and she replied that she hadn't. The attorney also asked if she had looked at photos of the burial site or Skylar's backyard, and again, the doctor said she hadn't. A fetal medicine specialist, another doctor, testified in the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily under questioning by the prosecution. The doctor questioned the claim that Skylar's baby was stillborn, pointing out that there was only one screening and that measurements of fundal height during the third trimester of pregnancy have a 60% margin of error. The doctor also noted that Skylar had reported feeling her baby move, which is not possible for a deceased baby. Furthermore, the doctor expressed skepticism about a report filed by a doctor for the defense, which suggested that Skylar's baby likely had growth issues. During cross-examination by Skylar's attorney, the doctor was asked if he was being paid by the prosecution. He explained that he received $5,000 per day, which is the cost to his practice when a doctor is absent. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, revealing shocking and heart-wrenching evidence. The most impactful pieces of evidence were the pictures of the deceased baby's remains displayed on the television screen. Skylar's reactions during the trial, when the pictures of her baby's remains appeared on the screen, showed the lasting impact these images had on her. Initially, Skylar stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the photos, seemingly unable to bear the sight. This stoic demeanor was in contrast to her behavior the previous day, when she visibly trembled as the judge sat down before jury selection. Skylar's defense team presented their case, arguing that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed that the prosecution's evidence consisted of half-truths and that some texts presented in court were taken out of context. The defense team argued that Skylar's frequent use of informal texting language did not necessarily mean she committed the crime of murdering her daughter. They highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, specifically her long-standing battle with an eating disorder that began when she was 12. The team presented evidence that Skylar regularly saw a psychologist and nutritionist to manage her condition, and showed the jury photos of Skylar at different weights and appearances, including when she was extremely thin and when she appeared slightly heavier. Skylar's defense attorneys highlighted that despite her physical condition, she had cradled the baby for hours while bleeding on the bathroom floor, demonstrating her strong commitment to comforting and caring for the lifeless body after enduring extreme pain. The attorneys told the court that Skylar had planned to inform her family about her pregnancy, but unfortunately, she never got the chance, according to her doctor. Skylar was told she would give birth within 8 to 10 weeks, so she assumed she would have enough time to attend the prom and graduate from high school before discussing the situation with her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn. He argued that since Scott didn't admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it's possible it detached before or during birth. The doctor also pointed out that Skylar's description of the baby's pale appearance was notable, as newborns are usually a purplish color, indicating they're healthy. Additionally, the obstetrician stated that Skylar's weight gain of only 15 pounds throughout her pregnancy was minimal, and suggested that her eating disorder may have restricted the baby's development in the womb. This testimony, aimed to raise questions about the accuracy of Skylar's statements to the police regarding the baby's well-being. The defense argued that Skylar had been selective in what she told the police during her interrogation, omitting any harmful behavior towards the baby, and that her testimony lacked credibility. They suggested that other factors might have contributed to the baby's death. After a one-week trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before delivering a verdict. Skylar was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, she was found guilty of abuse of a corpse, a felony carrying a maximum 1-year prison sentence. The judge ordered her to remain in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the following day. At the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of her mistakes. The judge was unsympathetic, rebuking Skylar for her role in the tragic loss of her baby. He emphasized that better decisions during her pregnancy would have saved her child's life. The judge's words were stern and unyielding, making it clear that Skylar's choices had devastating consequences. After expressing his dissatisfaction with Skylar's behavior, the judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation for abusing a corpse. This sentence served as a reminder that her actions were both morally wrong and illegal. In November 2020, Skylar's lawyers asked the judge to end her probation 2 years early, and the request was granted. During the hearing, Skylar said she wanted to return to a normal life and didn't need a probation officer to supervise her anymore. The judge acknowledged her progress and agreed that the probation department no longer needed to devote resources to her case. The judge emphasized that probation is not just about punishing or rehabilitating someone, but also giving them a chance to show why they shouldn't be sent to prison. Since being found not guilty, Skylar has made the most of her second chance. She has finished 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that defended her. Although she was cleared of all charges, Skylar has encountered difficulties in finding more employment due to her being on probation. However, she remains resolute in pursuing her career ambitions and has shown an interest in going to law school to become a public defender. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Savannah Gray Wind. Savannah Gray Wind was born on August 9, 1995, in Burke County, North Dakota, to a family with a mix of cultural backgrounds. Her father is of European American descent, while her mother is a member of the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. Savannah had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and a younger sister, Kayla. Her parents, Norberta and Joe, were proud of their children. The family lived in Fargo, North Dakota, until Savannah was 9 years old. Then in 2005 they moved to Spirit Lake Reservation. Savannah loves nature and animals, especially horses. It was on the reservation that she met her partner, Ashton Matheny, when she was 15 years old. They remained together as they grew older. When it was time for college, the family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found work caring for the elderly at a nursing home. She studied to become a nurse and is preparing to take her exams in September. She was expecting her first child and was excited to start her life with Ashton. They had found an apartment and planned to move in together in early September. However, at the time of her pregnancy, Savannah was staying with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. The building was also home to Brooke Cruz, a 38-year-old woman, and her partner, William Hone, who rented an apartment on the 3rd floor. Brooke's life was deeply affected by a past marked by hardship and complexity. The experiences turned her into a dark and emotionally disturbed person. Brooke had trouble managing her emotions and behaviors, often feeling anxious and angry. Brooke's fascination with mysticism and true crime stories began at a young age. As an adult, she studied the psychology of serial killers and attempted to understand their thought processes. Her writing reflected an obsession with human nature's darker side. Brooke saw two conflicting forces within people, good and bad, but her own life was a testament to the destructive power of unchecked darkness. By the time Brooke was 38, struggling with depression, physical illness, and exhaustion from toxic relationships that included regular physical abuse. Her fear of losing William was exacerbated by her inability to get pregnant. This desperate situation drove Brooke to think about committing a shocking crime, taking the life of a pregnant woman to take the baby for herself. After Brooke's arrest, investigators found a disturbing collection of books and notes in her apartment. The books covered topics such as forensic psychology, obstetrics, and law. Her notes listed items for a birthing kit, including scissors, blades, clamps, gloves, and an infant CPR bag. Brooke also had a stash of oxytocin, a hormone used to induce labor. Brooke grew up in a large family in Bradenton, Florida. Her parents divorced when she was young, leaving her mother to care for 7 children, including Brooke. While her family appeared to be well off, Brooke's diary revealed a difficult childhood that she tried to forget. As she entered her teenage years, Brooke became increasingly troubled and was the only one of her siblings to move in with her father, a man her mother described as a professional criminal. After a difficult period living with her father, Brooke was passed around through various foster families, causing her to lose contact with her siblings. Years later, they would only find out that Brooke had become the mother of 7 children. In 1995, when she was 15 years old, she met Aaron Edwards. 2 years later, she gave birth to her first child in Florida but chose to leave the baby with the father and relocate. Despite a court order to pay child support, Brooke failed to meet her obligations. She would eventually reconnect with her daughter briefly on Facebook when the child turned 14. Brooke worked multiple jobs, including as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant, a sales representative, and an animal specialist at Petland in Florida. However, her life was further marked by brushes with the law. In 2002, the 23-year-old was jailed in Missouri for document falsification but was paroled on August 31, 2022. Unfortunately, her freedom was short-lived, as she was rearrested and jailed in Texas for violating her parole. By the time Brooke was 27, she married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota, in 2006. She gave birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant at her husband's carpentry shop. However, Brooke had an affair, which ultimately led to their divorce in June 2009. Carl Cruz gained custody of their children, and Brooke moved to California without explanation. The only thing she did carefully and diligently throughout her life was to keep diaries, meticulously recording events as they unfolded. After a terrible crime has occurred, the diary was published in the press. The diary told of a string of lovers, home births, and abortions. At first, many of these relationships seem healthy and loving. However, over time, the men in her life begin to control her by making her feel inferior. Brooke felt that Carl Cruz bullied and humiliated her, making her feel like a bad and promiscuous mother. Despite these negative feelings, after moving to California and filing for divorce, Brooke surprisingly returned to Carl Cruz's house. She then registered on a dating website and started taking psychology classes seriously. Brooke met Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia, on the dating site Tagged. Brooke decided to move to Australia to be with Andrew. However, before leaving, she was involved in a dispute with Carl Cruz over child custody in January 2012. During the argument, she grabbed a knife and attacked Carl Cruz. The police arrested her and charged her. Although she denied the allegations, she chose not to wait for her court hearing and instead fled to Australia using false immigration documents. Once there, she married Andrew. Andrew's marriage to Brooke lasted only 6 months. During that time, he discovered her past, including a previous husband and children in the US, as well as fake immigration papers. According to Andrew, Brooke threatened him for helping her, prompting him to report everything to the police as a precautionary measure. Andrew remembers their marriage as a time when Brooke became intensely interested in crime and the behaviors of serial killers. Brooke's interest in crime began as early as 2012, when she was studying psychology in nursing. Her thesis focused on serial killers, and she spent a lot of time reading about them. In total, Brooke spent 6 months and 10 days in Australia before returning to the US in October 2012. However, after returning to the US, she became embroiled in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. Reconciling with Andrew might have given her a chance to start over, but instead, she met William Hone, a 28-year-old man with a history of child abuse, in late 2012. Brooke fell in love with William, a man who had been divorced twice. Despite his troubled past, Brooke was optimistic about her new life. She took a job and began to rediscover herself. In 2013, Brooke decided to pursue a degree at Minnesota State University, enrolling in courses such as social behavior, psychology of deviant behavior, and research methods. She was particularly drawn to the psychology of serial killers, and her paper on the subject earned her top marks. Brooke's relationship with William was loving and kind at first, creating a peaceful home for their children. However, over time, the relationship became codependent, marked by joint substance abuse, and the problem is getting more and more tense. As Brooke's relationship deteriorated, her well-being suffered. She began to withdraw from her children, struggled in her job, and became increasingly fixated on her research into the darker aspects of human psychology. In 2014, Brooke's life and spirit changed dramatically after a series of terrible things happened to her. The specifics of these things are not disclosed, but they appear to have had a profound and lasting impact on her mental health. Brooke suffered a panic attack and was rushed to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. In the following year, Brooke's relationship with William began to deteriorate. She expressed her feelings of emptiness in her diary. She felt neglected, which led to her starting to isolate herself from others. Brooke's physical and mental health continued to decline, and she was eventually diagnosed with a gallbladder disease. This led to a significant decline in her overall well-being, causing her to become reclusive and rarely leave her house. The situation took a turn for the worse when Brooke's partner, William, became violent. In May 2016, the police responded to a call and found that William had brutally beaten Brooke in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching her. However, he failed to comply with the restraining order and was found in Brooke's apartment 6 months later. The relationship between Brooke and William continued, but it was no longer healthy. However, one issue remained: William wanted a child, while Brooke was unable to have one due to a 2011 abortion. In 2017, after a fight, Brooke fabricated a pregnancy to prevent William from leaving her. To convince him, she sent him fake proof, including a false ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. Brooke found an online recording of a random baby's heartbeat and presented it to William, claiming it was the heartbeat of the child she carrying. In reality, there was no pregnancy. William had already shared with friends and family that Brooke was pregnant, and in an attempt to save face, he pressured her to actually have the baby. Brooke understood William's statement as a final decision and thought he was insisting that they adopt a child from someone else, specifically their pregnant neighbor Savannah, who lived 3 floors below them. Brooke, who had medical knowledge, began making a list of what she needed to induce labor. One Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke deceived Savannah by offering her $20 to model a dress, claiming it was one she was currently sewing. Savannah agrees and goes to Brooke's apartment, unaware of Brooke's true intentions. Meanwhile, Savannah had ordered a pizza, expecting to eat it when she returned home. Savannah did not return home at the expected time. The brother went upstairs to the apartment Brooke's around 2:30 p.m. and heard the sound of a sewing machine, but no one answered the door. A short while later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked on the door. Brooke, who was with Savannah, yelled out that they were still working on a dress and that Savannah was trying it on, which is why they couldn't open the door. When Norberta returned home, she found that the pizza was untouched. She texted her daughter several times but received no response. She then went upstairs to the apartment, where a neighbor informed her that Savannah had left a while ago after finishing her dress fitting. Norberta became anxious and searched her apartment. Finding that Savannah's shoes, purse, car keys, and other belongings were still there. Savannah had been experiencing heat and swelling that made it painful and difficult for her to walk, so it was unlikely that she had gone for a walk. Norberta called Ashton Matheny, hoping that he might have picked up Savannah, but he replied that he hadn't heard from her either. Growing increasingly worried, Norberta called the police and began driving around the neighborhood, searching for her pregnant daughter. Norberta was driving and thought that if Savannah had gone out, Norberta would have found her nearby. Later that day, the police searched Brooke and William's apartment because it was the last place Savannah was seen. They allowed the police to enter and didn't interfere, but since the police didn't have a warrant, they didn't check inside closets or behind closed doors. The police informed Savannah's family that since she was considered an adult, she had the right to make her own choices. They also stated that without evidence of a crime, there was no requirement for them to keep the family updated on her situation. The investigators concluded that Savannah had left voluntarily. However, Savannah's family was upset by the police department's apparent indifference to her disappearance. The police searched the apartment 2 more times but found nothing. Later, William would admit that he hid Savannah infant in a suitcase and Savannah's body in a dresser with the shelves removed. 2 days after Savannah's murder, William and Brooke drove to a bridge over the Red River, carrying the dresser with Savannah's body, and dumped it into the water. On August 23, 2017, William's co-workers reported to police that he had mentioned having a baby at home. Around the same time, residents of the apartment building where Williams lived hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5, prompting them to notify the police. With this new information, officers obtained a warrant and conducted a thorough search of the apartment, where they found a live newborn baby girl. Brooke later revealed that Savannah had given her the baby. According to Brooke, Savannah had given birth to the baby just 2 days after she went missing. Savannah had confided in Brooke that she didn't want the baby and had asked for Brooke help in inducing labor. 2 days later, at 3 a.m., Savannah arrived at Brooke's home with the baby in her arms and handed the infant over to her. After Savannah was reported missing, the police took her baby into temporary custody. A few days later, a DNA test confirmed the baby's parentage, and Savannah's daughter was reunited with her father for 3 more days. The police and hundreds of local residents conducted a thorough search of the area. The police asked residents to carefully check their properties, including vacant apartments, dumpsters, and any other hiding for evidence. At a press conference on August 27, the police chief urged the public to help find Savannah. However, just a day later, a fisherman found her body wrapped in plastic on the Red River near Harwood. Savannah was identified by a tattoo on her leg. The police charged Brooke Cruz and William Hone with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information. They admitted to the incident, with Brooke explaining that she initiated the fight by accusing Savannah of taking her cat without permission and mistreating it. The argument turned physical, and Brooke pushed Savannah, who fell and hit her head on the bathroom sink, losing consciousness. Brooke used a knife to remove the baby from Savannah, making a cut from hip to hip. As she did this, Savannah went consciousness. When questioned, Brooke confirmed that William was not aware of the plan beforehand. According to Brooke, William came home, entered the bathroom, and saw Savannah. He asked if Savannah was alive, and Brooke replied that she didn't know. William then left the bathroom briefly, returning in his underwear with a rope. He used the rope to strangle Savannah. After the murder, Brooke and William cleaned the floor and walls, then stuffed Savannah's body into a bathroom closet. When the police arrived, Brooke attempted to remain calm. The officers searched the apartment, but their search was superficial due to the lack of a search warrant. As a result, they did not look in closets or dressers. According to Brooke, the child was under a blanket on the bed next to William during the searches. The child was calm and did not cry, so the child was not discovered. By the time of the third inspection on August 20th, Savannah's body had been moved to a dresser, and the infant was hidden in a suitcase. On August 21st, Brooke and William disposed of a dresser by taking it down the stairs, loading it into their Jeep Cherokee, and driving it to the river. William denied participating in the crime, but admitted to hiding a newborn baby girl and providing false information to police to cover up the crime. Both Brooke and William were set a bail of $2 million, which William thought was an unrealistic amount. Brooke was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although William's participation in the crime was not proven during the trial, he was found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty. A cellmate of Brooke's, Jennifer Robinson, testified against Brooke, claiming that Brooke had confessed to strangling Savannah with a rope after discovering Savannah's affair with William. In May 2019, William was sent to prison. On October 7, 2019, he appealed to the Supreme Court. After a review of his sentence, Judge Olin, who had originally given William a life sentence, decided to give him the longest possible sentence allowed at the time, which was 20 years in prison. Since William had already spent 775 days in prison, he would have to serve more than 7 additional years. Savannah's baby, Hasley, is now 6 years old and attending kindergarten. The Savannah's parents regularly post updates on their public Facebook page about their granddaughter's life. The case has received significant attention, and Norberta believes that her daughter's disappearance was not taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. She thinks that if Savannah were white, her disappearance would have been treated more seriously. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family. She was the youngest of 2 children. Her parents, Al Morales and Brian, raised her along with her older brother, Omar. Luz Maria's early life was marked by a serious health scare. As an infant, she nearly died due to an intestinal obstruction and underwent a complex surgery. Although her doctors were uncertain about her chances of recovery, her mother's prayers and faith played a significant role in Luz Maria's survival. Fortunately, the surgery did not affect Luz Maria's development. she grew up to be a healthy and active child. During her school years, Luz Maria was a sporty. She was actively involved in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance. She easily makes friends with everyone and got along with people from different backgrounds. Luz Maria excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After completing her secondary education, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university. She chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. A fateful encounter took place when Luz Maria accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. The occasion was her older brother's 25th birthday, and the family wanted to surprise him with a motorcycle he had always desired. Inside the dealership, they were warmly greeted by a courteous and attentive young sales consultant named Jorge, who showcased the available models, offering some advice. Although Luz Maria and her mother have already chosen a model, but they want to consider and discuss it with her father before making a decision to buy it. As they left, they took a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria left her phone number for further communication. Shortly after, she received a call from Jorge himself, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, the conversation turned to a more personal subject. Over the following days, Jorge contacted Luz Maria several times, gradually building up the courage to invite her to meet at a coffee shop. Jorge was clearly smitten with Luz Maria, the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he didn't know how to approach her. Luckily, Luz Maria also liked Jorge, and when he asked to meet, she happily agreed. Although Luz Maria was a year younger, their small age difference wasn't an issue. They fell deeply in love, both believing it was love at first sight, and that a long, happy life was ahead. A few short months into their relationship, they decided to live together, despite parental objections. They had a small, private wedding, attended only by close friends and family. However, their special day almost got derailed due to a mishap at the banquet venue. They had to cough up extra cash to save the celebration, which wedding ultimately took place on schedule. Jorge was born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina, a town in central Guatemala. Jorge and his younger brother, Pablo, grew up in a low-income household. His family struggled financially, so as children, they did not have the luxury of fine clothes and expensive toys, as the family's limited income only covered the most basic needs. Even though Jorge grew up in difficult circumstances, he seemed to have no motivation to change his life for the better. He lived life at his own pace, choosing to enjoy simple pleasures rather than strive for advanced degrees or job security. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, unsociable, and having few close relationships, especially with women. When he met the love of his life, Luz Maria, he went all out to win her heart and quickly proposed, fearing she might change her mind. However, Luz Maria's parents, Al Morales and Brian, were suspicious of him from the start. They couldn't quite put their finger on what it was about him that they didn't like, but they couldn't convince their daughter to call off the wedding. The marriage turned out to be unhappy. After the wedding, Luz Maria became pregnant, but she had not yet finished her university degree and struggled to find a good job. Due to her lack of experience and health issues, she had to accept short-term, low-skilled jobs. Meanwhile, her husband lost his job and was in no hurry to find a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became more difficult. Both spouses were unemployed, and they had no money to pay rent, buy food, or pay for the family's basic needs. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that their only option was to temporarily move in with his parents. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but facing no alternative and having a baby to care for, she eventually gave her consent. Luz Maria's mother was aware of the problems her daughter was facing in her marriage, but despite mother concerns, Luz Maria was optimistic that things would improve. Luz Maria assured her mother that everything would get better soon, so her mother decided to visit her and see how she was doing. However, when she went to Luz Maria's husband's house to see her daughter, she was shocked by what she found. Luz Maria was in a terrible state, eating only once a day and very little at that. This was partly due to Jorge's family not providing her with enough food, even though she was unemployed and breastfeeding her young daughter. The lack of food was only one of many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly belittled and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was annoyed by the sound of the baby crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. On several occasions, he threw items at Luz Maria, including a baby bottle that hit her and her daughter, Alice, who was in her arms. Despite witnessing these events, Jorge just stood by and did nothing to protect his wife and children, he treating them as if they were strangers. Morales convinces her daughter to take her granddaughter to her maternal home. Jorge arrived shortly afterwards, asking his wife to return home and promising to find a job. Luz Maria agreed, on the condition that they could rent their own apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. After completing her education and defending her diploma, Luz Maria landed her dream job at the city prosecutor's office. As a smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began to advance in her career. As time passed, the family's financial situation significantly improved, thanks to Luz Maria's hard work and success. They were eventually able to afford a car. Meanwhile, Jorge continued to struggle with his own life, failing to find direction and instead relying on his wife's income. His laziness and jealousy intensified over time, causing tension in the household. Jorge had a volatile temper, and the situation worsened with time. Jorge was a man who preferred a life of leisure, spending most of his time at home watching TV, drinking beer with friends, and relying on his wife's income. He was extremely possessive and controlling, restricting his wife's freedom and autonomy. He wouldn't allow her to make friends, have lunch with colleagues, or even be alone without him. He constantly monitored her phone activity, checked her call history, and read her messages. He also forbade her from creating social media accounts. When they were alone at home, Jorge's behavior was just as bad. He frequently arguments, blamed his wife for all their problems, and never took responsibility for his actions. When they lived with his parents, Jorge failed to stand up for his wife, instead watching as she was humiliated, insulted, and even physically abused by his relatives. Jorge frequently resorted to physical violence in their relationship. He had a controlling attitude towards his wife, Luz Maria, and wrongly believed she would accept his abusive treatment. Their neighbors frequently heard screams coming from their house and witnessed signs of physical abuse on Luz Maria's face and body. Luz Maria had tried to leave her husband multiple times, taking their daughter and moving in with her parents. However, her husband would always show up, beg for forgiveness on his knees, and promise to change. Despite her parents' warnings to leave him, Luz Maria would forgive her husband and give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after another violent argument, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter, Alice, fled to her mother's house in tears. The next day, Jorge arrived, but it was unclear whether he was seeking reconciliation with his wife or just wanted his car back. He claimed to have found a new job and promised that their lives would improve, swearing that he would never physically harm Luz Maria again. Luz Maria believed him once more and returned to their rented apartment with her husband. In January 2021, Jorge failed to get a job as promised and stole the money Luz Maria had earned, leaving their family with nothing. Luz Maria called her mother to complain, and her mother agreed to meet with her to give her some money until she received her next salary. However, on January 19th, Luz Maria failed to show up and was unreachable by phone, which was unusual for her. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Morales went to Luz Maria's workplace the next day and found that she had not shown up for 2 consecutive days and had not been in contact with anyone. Around the same time, Jorge was also looking for Luz Maria. He went to the prosecutor's office claiming they had a fight and assuming she had gone to her mother's house. However, Morales suspected that he was lying and immediately went to the police to report Luz Maria missing. That same day, a nationwide alert system was launched under the codename Isabel Claudina. This system was originally designed to facilitate urgent searches for missing young women. When the massive search began, her husband, Jorge, was immediately identified as the lead suspect. In fact, he was the only suspect. Luz Maria had no enemies, and there was no reason to believe she had been kidnapped. The last person to see her alive was Jorge himself. Jorge denied any involvement in Luz Maria's disappearance, claiming he had been searching for her and was outraged to be considered a suspect. Jorge's story had several holes in it, and he couldn't give a clear reason for not telling the police about his wife's disappearance on the same day it happened. If Jorge thought Luz Maria was at her mother's house, it wasn't clear why he didn't call or visit her there. On January 22, municipal workers stumbled upon the body of Luz Maria Lopez while responding to a clogged storm drain near the road. When they lifted the grate, they found a large plastic bag containing charred human remains. The workers immediately reported the discovery to the police, suspected that the body might be that of Luz Maria. Forensic experts confirmed that the remains belonged to she, and Luz Maria's parents and brother identified the body despite its severe disfigurement from fire. Notably, the body was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Despite the body's severe burns, pathologists determined that Luz Maria had been severely beaten and died from asphyxia. Evidence of internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was still alive, and caked blood in her nose and mouth supported this conclusion. Deep marks on her neck also indicated strangulation. At the time of the discovery of the body, no new suspects had emerged. Luz Maria's parents were convinced that their son-in-law, Jorge, was responsible for the brutal murder of their daughter. As a result, Jorge was immediately taken into custody, and investigators began to look into the motive behind the crime. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior were consulted to examine the relationships within the family and the marriage. During the investigation, Luz Maria's mother, Morales, provided an audio recording that had been sent to her anonymously by a neighbor who had witnessed their frequent arguments. The recording captured a heated argument between they, in which Luz Maria frantically screams and cries for help, accompanied by the faint sounds of a child crying in the background. Morales was deeply shocked and extremely upset by the news. She emphasized that if the witness had immediately contacted the police, her daughter might still be alive. The witness did not call the police or even visit the house where the screams originated. The police were unable to locate the anonymous person, which meant they could not be officially involved in the investigation. During an interview, Morales urged citizens to be vigilant and report instances of domestic violence to the police rather than simply documenting them. She believed that such actions could help save lives. The crime sparked widespread outrage, prompting thousands of people to take to the streets and demand justice for Luz Maria. Jorge was taken into custody, but he continued to deny his involvement, claiming he had driven his wife to work on the day she disappeared. Security footage did show their car heading in the direction of her workplace. But the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. Additionally, no footage showed the car stopping or Luz Maria getting out. At the house they was renting, police discovered evidence of a violent incident. There were faint blood stains and drag marks, suggesting that this was where the brutal attack had occurred. Further evidence was discovered in the trunk of the family car, where microscopic fragments of burnt human flesh were found. The investigators also became interested in a recent purchase made by a double orthopedic mattress. Specifically, they were interested in the dense polyethylene wrapping that came with the mattress. A comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to package the burnt remains of Luz Maria. Additionally, several neighbors came forward as witnesses, reporting that they had frequently heard Jorge yelling at his wife and threatening to kill her. Just days before Luz Maria's disappearance, Jorge had been overheard shouting that he would kill her if she tried to leave him, and that he would hide her body so well that no one would ever find it. Criminologists used collected data and witness testimony to reconstruct the events surrounding the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, a brutal murder took place. The day before, Luz Maria and her husband, Jorge, had a violent argument. Jorge physically assaulted her. On this occasion, his rage escalated, causing him to strike his wife multiple times. Her screams for help were heard by the neighbors, but they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The beating left Luz Maria with a broken nose and a head injury. Jorge then strangled her with his bare hands. In an attempt to dispose of the body, he dragged it to the backyard, doused it with flammable liquid, and set it on fire. However, the fire produced a significant amount of smoke and a strong odor, which Jorge feared would attract the attention of the neighbors. He quickly extinguished the flames, wrapped the charred remains in plastic, and sought a secluded location to hide the body, he believing it would never be discovered. Jorge committed a heinous crime in front of his 3.5-year-old daughter, who was old enough to partially understand what was happening. The child witnessed the beating and crime, and her cries and screams were recorded. Despite this, Jorge attempted to cover his tracks by using his knowledge of forensics, gained from his wife's textbooks, to create an alibi. He disposed of her body in a drainage sewer on a poorly lit road with no surveillance cameras. The next morning, Jorge drove to his wife's workplace, pretending to have taken her there as usual. He then began a fake search for her, contacting her colleagues, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers delayed proceedings and attempted to mislead the investigation. They claimed that all the evidence and witness statements were indirect and did not directly prove Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, arguing that he was deeply depressed due to the accusations of killing Luz Maria he loved and the mother of his child. However, the crucial evidence came from Luz Maria's phone, which was in Jorge's possession. On the day after the crime, he sent multiple messages from her phone to different people, attempting to make people believe that Luz Maria was still alive. An analysis of the phone's movements revealed that it was consistently in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense team attempted to spin this evidence in their favor, claiming that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city with it while searching for her. However, they failed to explain why Jorge was sending messages from her phone. Furthermore, bruises and scratches on Jorge's body, which were documented by experts through photographs, suggested that Luz Maria had put up a struggle. The most noticeable injury on Jorge was a scratch on his neck. However, investigators were unable to find Jorge's skin cells under Luz Maria's fingernails. Despite several questionable points in the case, the prosecutor pushed for the maximum possible sentence. The defendant was found guilty of brutally murdering his wife in October 2022. Jorge was sentenced to 50 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. The grandparents expressed that their granddaughter had given their lives new meaning.